Chapter 137. What are we going to do? Of course, we're going to kill you. We're in the business of skinning people and pulling out their tendons. When we get back, we'll teach you all a lesson. Then, we'll skin you all and make lanterns out of you. Then, we'll slice your meat and feed it to the dogs. As the man spoke, it was as if he could already see the scene that would make him excited. He laughed heartily. The bandits behind him also laughed heartily. Bing Tang's body went weak from fear, but she forced herself not to faint. When senior servant Liu, who was supporting Chao Yuqing, heard this, she finally couldn't take it anymore. Her eyes rolled back, and she fell to the ground. Chao Yuqing, who had already fainted, also fell to the ground with a dull thud. That person saw that although Qin Yining's face was pale, her eyes were calm, as if she was calmer than before. She didn't show any fear at all. A large, rough hand patted her cheek. TSK, little girl, you're not afraid at all. You should at least shed a few tears. That way, we'll be happy. Qin Yining tilted her head to avoid that person's hand. She sneered. Aren't you all just looking for money? If you really wanted to kill us, you would have killed us in the carriage. Since you didn't kill us just now, then we're still useful. If the hostage is injured, I'm afraid it won't be easy to exchange for money. Then, we'll have wasted all of our efforts. You're really interesting, little girl. No wonder you're the daughter of an old fox. A man behind him shouted. Why are you talking nonsense with her? Knock her out and bring her back. When Qin Yining heard this, she immediately became alert and tensed up. Even with her hands behind her back, she still didn't give up thinking about how to escape. However, the man seemed to have seen through Qin Yining's intentions. Without waiting for her to move, he chopped at the back of her neck with a knife. Qin Yining's body trembled, and she fell to the ground, unconscious. She was lifted onto the man's shoulders by his arms. Bing Tang became anxious and struggled to escape. Unfortunately, her little strength was not worth mentioning in front of these people. She was also knocked unconscious. When Qin Yining opened her eyes again, she found herself in a dimly lit room. Her nose was filled with the smell of straw and firewood. The smell of damp soil, mixed with the smell of mold, made her suspect that she had returned to the straw shed she lived in with her foster mother when she was young. Her mouth was stuffed with rags and her hands and feet were tied with straw ropes. She looked around to find herself and Chao Yuqing in a small wooden shed. When she listened carefully, she could hear people whispering at the door to the sound of chickens and ducks. Qin Yining was certain that this place should be the woodshed of a farmer. She looked left and right, but couldn't find Bing Tang and Lu Mama. She then looked at Chao Yuqing. All her valuables had been taken away. Her clothes were slightly messy. Her pretty face was pale as she lay on the ground. Her mouth was also stuffed with rags. Her hands and feet were also tied with hemp rope. Qin Yining was a little flustered. It seemed that these people were really here to kidnap them and threaten their father. Saying that he would skin them alive and pull out their tendons was just to scare them. She just didn't know if they were after money or something else. If they were after money, it would be easy. But if these people didn't have good intentions and were arranged by her father's political enemies or someone else, it wouldn't be easy to exchange them for money. Qin Yining was full of doubts and worries, but these emotions didn't affect her judgment of her surroundings. Everything on her body must have been taken away. Qin Yining moved her tied hands and feet and frowned in frustration. What should she do? Was she going to sit here and wait for death? At this moment, she suddenly heard the sound of footsteps approaching the wooden door. Qin Yining looked through the irregular gap in the door. She could vaguely tell that the person outside was dressed very luxuriously because she saw the reflection of the silver embroidery on the brocade under the sunlight. Creak! The wooden door was pushed open. Qin Yining looked at the door nervously and saw two masked men escorting a person in. When Qin Yining saw the person in the middle, her almond-shaped eyes widened in shock. It was a woman. She was wearing a royal blue plain dress embroidered with silver chrysanthemums and a pure white cloak. Her gray hair, which had turned white for many days, was neatly tied up in a big bun with a white flower in her temple. The madam walked closer and took off the rag covering Qin Yining's mouth. Qin Yining stared at her blankly and murmured, "Grandmother, Why are you here? Duchess Ding looked at Qin Yining and smiled. She lowered her head and untied the knots on her hands and feet. Sister, I'm sorry. Qin Yining's hands were held by Duchess Ding's dry and cold hands. She stood up with the help of her hands and still looked at her in disbelief. Grandmother, what's going on? She looked at the people behind Duchess Ding and asked, Who are those peoples? Duchess Ding was still smiling, and her shrewd eyes were shining. She looked at the expression on Qin Yining's face without a trace, and then looked at Xiao Yuqing, who was unconscious on the ground. Sister E, do you know the Qingtian Alliance? Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat, and then she understood something. Grandmother, the Qingtian Alliance is a rebel that the imperial court must kill. A rebel? Duchess Ding sneered. I wasn't a rebel before. Your grandfather, your cousin, and your nephew weren't rebels. What good end did they have? Qin Yining felt sad when she thought of the tragic deaths of the men in Duke Ding's mansion. She could understand the irreconcilable hatred between Duchess Ding and the incapable emperor. But was joining the Qingtian Alliance a foolproof plan? The Qingtian Alliance was a civil organization that had recently emerged. It intended to overthrow the tyranny of the incapable emperor and restore justice to the people. It loved to fight for justice. Wherever there were oppressed and wronged people, there would be the Qingtian Alliance. Most of the people who had been oppressed by the incapable emperor and corrupt officials eventually became members of the Qingtian Alliance. Qin Yining didn't know this at first. She only knew about it when Master Zhong mentioned it when they were chatting. At that time, she thought that it was not surprising that there was such a resistance among the people because of the incapable emperor's muddleheadedness. Maybe it could get rid of the evil and bring peace to the good and save some people who had been harmed by the incapable emperor. But she didn't expect that the Qingtian Alliance had something to do with her grandmother. Grandmother, did you? Qin Yining swallowed her saliva and said with difficulty, Did you do something to the Qingtian Alliance? Duchess Ding nodded and said with a smile, There are too many people in the world who have been harmed by the incapable emperor. He only needs to raise his arm and call for help, and countless people who have been persecuted will respond. Duchess Ding took a dagger from the man behind her and put it in Qin Yining's hand. Sister Ego, kill this bitch from the Chao family for your grandmother. If it weren't for the demon empress instigation, your eldest cousin wouldn't have had his brain forcibly seized and died to show his sincerity. Your grandfather wouldn't have been angered by the incapable emperor. There are so many abominable people in the world. Let's start with Chao. As long as you kill Chao, you will be the leader of the Qingtian Alliance. All the forces in the alliance will belong to you. Chapter 138. Qin Yining's brain was buzzing, and the dagger in her hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Looking back at Xiao Yuqing, who was unconscious on the ground, it was easy to kill an unconscious woman. It was even easier than hunting in the mountains. But could she kill her? Qin Yining was not afraid of killing people. She was also angry about what happened to her grandfather's family. She hated the persecutions of the fatuous emperor and the evil empress to the Sun family, and the manipulation of her father and mother. In fact, she was very supportive of the existence of the Qingtian Alliance. But her mind, which had always been not simple, thought of many possibilities at this time. Holding the dagger, she took Duchess Ding's hand and said, Grandmother, shall we talk outside? Hearing this, Duchess Ding's smile fell. She looked at Qin Yining with sharp eyes, as if she was examining her. Qin Yining felt uncomfortable being stared at by Duchess Ding. She asked, Grandmother, can't we talk outside? I have a few words to say to you alone. Duchess Ding hesitated for a moment before nodding and saying, Come on. Then she turned around. Immediately, two members of the Qingtian Alliance opened the wooden door for Duchess Ding. Qin Yining followed Duchess Ding to the yard. Now it was backed by the mountains, and there were fields on three sides. There were several houses scattered not far away, and there were large fields between each house. Because it was early spring, there was a little green in the distant mountains and near forests, but the cold wind was more piercing than in winter. Qin Yining followed Duchess Ding to the yard. It was far away from the guards, so she was not afraid that the conversation would be overheard. Moreover, for Duchess Ding, her safety was guaranteed. If Qin Yining did something bad to her, the people of the Qing-Tian alliance could arrive at once. When Qin Yining saw that Duchess Ding brought her to the place to talk, she felt a little cold in her heart. It seemed that her grandmother not only wanted to drag her into the water for revenge, but also didn't trust her from the bottom of her heart. Grandmother, are the people I brought okay? Of course they are fine. Would I hurt an innocent little girl? Duchess Ding sneered. You're so concerned about your servants. Why don't you ask your sister-in-law and cousins how they are? Grandmother is very capable. Naturally, she can take good care of the women of the Sun family. Qin Yining spoke slowly. He didn't answer Duchess Ding's question. Instead, he said, Grandmother, please forgive me for not being able to do what you said today. Granddaughter will not spread the news that grandmother is the alliance master of the Qing-Tian alliance, and I will not reveal your whereabouts. However, if you want granddaughter to work for you, granddaughter will not agree. Duchess Ding pursed her lips unhappily and said expressionlessly, Don't you want to have your own power? Do you know how many more subordinates you will have if you become the alliance master of the Green Sky Alliance? Granddaughter is just an ordinary girl. Why would she need so much power? Others might not be able to see through it, but do you think I can't? Duchess Ding sneered. You are smart and ambitious enough. If I didn't know you well, I wouldn't have given you the position of the alliance master of the Qing-Tian alliance. Grandmother, if you let me kill Chao and make a contribution to the Qing-Tian alliance, will the alliance members really believe that I, a girl who hasn't reached marriageable age, will be the alliance master? Grandmother, since you said that I was smart, why did you treat me as a fool and coax me? The alliance members don't believe in me, but in my identity. My father is Grand Tutor Qin, Marquis Anping. Qin Yining said with some sadness. I know grandmother's pain and hatred, but after all, I am still the daughter of the family Qin. I can't put the whole family Qin in the teeth of the storm because of my personal interests. I have no right to decide the fate of everyone in the family Qin. Grandmother, when you kidnapped your granddaughter today and forced your granddaughter to kill Madame Chao, could it be that you truly did not think of these things? Qin Yining looked up at Duchess Ding with tears in her eyes. I will never forget grandmother's love and care for me for the rest of my life. However, grandmother shouldn't treat me as a flag to stand on, and you shouldn't use me as a knife. Duchess Ding's expression changed a few times when she heard this. What Qin Yining said was reasonable, and her consideration was not wrong. But she hated it. She couldn't let the Sun family die in vain. She wanted to use all available resources to take revenge. Today's kidnapping plan was a chess piece that she wanted to use to tie the Qing-Tian alliance and Qin Huaiyuan together. She wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of the demon empress sister and relieve the hatred in her heart. Sister E, do you still remember your grandfather's face? Do you still remember what your eldest cousin and fifth cousin looked like? Duchess Ding's tone was full of desolation. Qin Yining closed her eyes. Tears welled up in her eyes. I remember. I won't forget it for the rest of my life. Then, why don't you want to avenge them? Duchess Ding's voice suddenly became sharp. Qin Yining said in a deep voice, I want to, but I know I can't. I can't drag the whole family Qin to die with me. And I can't let my father be restrained by others. Duchess Ding looked at Qin Yining with complicated and helpless eyes. All her emotions gradually condensed into tears in her eyes. But she didn't cry. Instead, she suddenly smiled. Sister E, if you don't want to kill Chao Yuqing, the Alliance's members will kill you. If the Alliance members want to kill you and your maidservant, I can't do anything about it. Grandmother, you. Qin Yining suddenly looked up at Duchess Ding and incredulously looked at the elder who had been giving her warmth and love since she recognized her ancestors. Her grandmother, who had once been willing to speak for her, who had once given her the Zhao Yunxi as a gift, who had once been shrewd and fair, was now blinded by hatred and didn't recognize her relatives anymore. Grandmother, you want to kill me? It's not me who will kill you, but them. If you don't agree to be their leader and know so many secrets, will they spare your life? Duchess Ding looked at Qin Yining and said, Chao Yuqing's death is not regrettable. If you kill her, you will be loved and respected by all the people of the Qing-Tian alliance. Isn't that enough for you? Qin Yining sighed softly and looked up at the blue sky. I don't care about worldly possessions, nor do I care about being respected and respected. What I want has always been very simple. I just want my family to be safe. Although I'm stupid and can't do anything for my family, at least I know what I can't do. Grandmother, please forgive me for not being able to promise you this. Duchess Ding stared at Qin Yining. She clenched and unclenched her fists as if she was suppressing her anger. Thinking of Duchess Ding's hatred and difficulties, Qin Yining's heart softened. He carefully stepped forward and was about to persuade her. Suddenly, he heard a scream behind him. The man's scream was far more terrifying than the woman's. A man walked quickly to Duchess Ding, pointed to the wooden door not far away, and said breathlessly, "Oh no, Chow ran away. 2 of our brothers guarding the door died." Ran away? Duchess Ding was stunned. Their hands and feet were clearly tied tightly, and there were 2 brothers guarding the door of the woodshed. Who on earth was so ruthless that they could kill 2 people without anyone noticing and rescue them? Chapter 139. Qin Yining was also full of doubts. They had just come out of the woodshed and said a few words, but they had disappeared. Did someone follow them to protect them in secret? Qin Yining didn't have such a person around him, but Chow Yuqing was the daughter of the Chow family after all. It was hard to guarantee that she didn't have such a person around her. But if that was the case, why didn't these people appear earlier? Why did they wait until she woke up and went out with Duchess Ding to save her? Perhaps the Chow family was eager for her to die here? Or the Chow family thought that she and Duchess Ding were in cahoots? If the Chow family really misunderstood that she and her grandmother were in cahoots, it would cause a lot of trouble. Although the Chow family and the family Qin had become in-laws, her father didn't treat Mrs. Chow warmly, and the position of Guozhang Chow was taken by her father. Even if Guozhang Chow was no longer an official in the court, his disciples were everywhere and his power was intertwined. The family Qin didn't have the ability to fight with him at present. Qin Yining thought of many things in an instant and immediately felt very troubled. So many troubles were caused by her grandmother, but now her grandmother was looking at her suspiciously. Qin Yining didn't know whether to be angry or helpless. Duchess Ding looked at Qin Yining for a long time and didn't see any other calculation in his expression. She immediately laughed at herself and said, "Now that she has run away, it's useless for me to say anything more. But you live under the same roof as Mrs. Chow, so there will be many opportunities to kill her in the future." Qin Yining looked at her grandmother and said seriously again, "Grandmother, I think I've made it very clear just now. I won't tell on you, nor do I want to make things difficult for you. I will even continue to take care of you, my aunt, and my cousins in the future. But I really can't let the lives of the Qin family be sacrificed." Duchess Ding shook her head in disappointment at Qin Yining's repeated refusal. The men guarding Duchess Ding had already gathered not far away. After hearing Qin Yining's refusal, they couldn't help but become angry. "Leader, why are you still talking nonsense with her? I think she is clearly greedy for glory and wealth. She is the same as that dog emperor." "Yes, leader. Not only is she in cahoots with that fatuous ruler, but she also disregarded her relationship with you and even colluded with the people of Dezhou. Yes, I heard that the person surnamed Yun of Dezhou has a close relationship with her. Maybe Qin Haodong brought her to the peace talks just to commit treason. Not only is she loyal to the incapable ruler, she even committed treason. Alliance Master, kill her! Kill her! Kill her!" The men were ferocious. They raised the steel sabers in their hands and stared at Qin Yining with bloodthirsty eyes. They were like vicious dogs that were about to pounce on Qin Yining and bite her into pieces. Qin Yining was not afraid. She just looked at Duchess Ding calmly. "Everyone shut up." Duchess Ding's voice was not loud, but it was full of power. Sure enough, the men did not shout anymore. Marquis Anping has always been serving Great Yin wholeheartedly, and he will never betray his own country. This is the same as the men of Ding General Manor. My granddaughter was sent to the peace talks by that fatuous ruler. Don't you know why? Everyone thought about Qin Huaiyuan's character over the years and fell silent for a while. Duchess Ding continued. Today, we want Miss Qin to be the leader. Isn't it because the Marquis of Anping has always been trustworthy? I hope that everyone won't be impulsive. Otherwise, won't we become the kind of fatuous and corrupt officials who kill the innocent? With just a few words, the crowd lowered their weapons, and their killing intent towards Qin Yining was reduced at once. Qin Yining secretly sighed. He had a new understanding of his grandmother's absolute status in the Qingtian alliance. Grandmother, Oh no! Run! Qin Yining was abruptly interrupted. He suddenly turned to look at the source of the voice. Qin Yining was so frightened that his eyes widened. He saw Chao Yuqing, who was wearing a luxurious silk dress and a cloak, holding a long sword. Behind her, 10 men in black clothes and silver masks were coming from not far away. Chao Yuqing's jade-like face was as cold as frost. The tip of her sword was swift and fierce, and her movements were nimble and agile. It was actually a level higher than the martial arts of the silver-masked men behind her, and those silver-masked men seemed to be following Chao Yuqing's lead. Qin Yining was shocked. He suddenly remembered the silver-masked men who came to rescue the emperor at the welcoming ceremony that day. One of them was a woman, and her figure was very similar to Chao Yuqing. Now, no matter how stupid Qin Yining was, he understood that Chao Yuqing was the leader of the spies around the emperor. Just now in the woodshed, it was clear that Chao Yuqing killed the guard and escaped by herself. Chao Yuqing deliberately asked her to go to the Fairy Lady Temple and deliberately arrested her. She probably already knew that the leader of the Qingtian alliance was Duchess Ding. She probably wanted to test her. She also wanted to lure the snake out of its hole, since the silver-masked spies around the emperor already knew that the leader of the Qingtian alliance was Duchess Ding. How could the emperor not know? Chao Yuqing had become his father's concubine. Did his father know Chao Yuqing's true identity? Qin Yining's face was pale. He was terrified when he thought about it. Chao Yuqing led a group of people to kill 7 or 8 members of the Qingtian alliance. They were about to rush in. Qin Yining looked at Duchess Ding in a panic and winked at her. Duchess Ding was also shocked by Chao Yuqing's aggressive approach. Seeing Qin Yining's eyes, she immediately understood what she meant. Qin Yining wanted her to take her hostage. Duchess Ding had mixed feelings. She intended to use and threaten Qin Yining, but Qin Yining wanted to protect her. Without thinking too much, Duchess Ding immediately hugged Qin Yining with one hand and took the knife from the man beside her with the other. She put it on Qin Yining's white and slender neck and shouted, "Stop! Otherwise, I'll kill her." Chao Yuqing pulled the sword out of one person's chest and looked in the direction of Qin Yining and Duchess Ding with a blank face. She sneered, "You really have a deep relationship with your granddaughter. You've really opened my eyes. You flatter me. Miss Chao is actually a spy for the incapable emperor. You've really opened my eyes. I wonder if your father, your mother, and your sister know Miss Chao's identity?" Duchess Ding was calm and composed. She put the knife on Qin Yining's neck and led people out of the courtyard. Qin Yining was so frightened that he shed tears. He struggled and shouted, "Let me go. I'm filial to you in vain, but you treat me like this. I was wrong about you." "Shut up. You're just a dog of the incapable emperor. How dare you talk about filial piety with me? If you're filial, why didn't you kill her just now?" Duchess Ding endured the heartache and hit Qin Yining on the shoulder with the handle of the knife. After Qin Yining screamed, she pointed the blade at Qin Yining's neck again. Chapter 140. Chao Yuqing saw that Qin Yining's face was covered with tears. She was so nervous that her face was pale. Her slender hands were holding one of Duchess Ding's arms. But because the cold blade was right beside her neck, it seemed that she would immediately bleed if she moved an inch forward. Qin Yining didn't dare to move at all, and her face was extremely gloomy. As early as when Qin Yining refused to kill her, she concluded that Qin Yining was not Duchess Ding's subordinate. Now, looking at Duchess Ding's ruthlessness to her, Chao Yuqing was even more sure that Qin Yining had nothing to do with the Qingtian alliance. If it were any other girl in the Qin family who was being held hostage at this time, Chao Yuqing would not care about her life and death. She would directly order people to rush up and kill the rebels. But the hostage was Qin Huaiyuan's most beloved daughter. Qin Huaiyuan had no children. Obviously, he loved his legitimate daughter very much. She was devoted to Qin Huaiyuan. If Qin Yining died at this moment, even if she didn't kill her, Qin Huaiyuan would hate her. Then, wouldn't there be an insurmountable gap between her and Qin Huaiyuan? It turns out that such a loyal person as Duchess Ding can be ruthless. I don't know that you implicated innocent people for your own selfishness and wanted to kill your own granddaughter. If Duchess Ding knew it in the netherworld, what would she think? Chao Yuqing's hand, which was holding the sword tightly, had turned white. You people of the Chao family are the least qualified to say this. Duchess Ding gnashed her teeth and wished she could rush forward and eat her flesh. The knife in her hand moved a little closer to Qin Yining's neck. Get out of the way and let us out. Otherwise, I will kill her. At worst, another young lady will be buried with us. It won't be a loss for our Qin-Tian alliance. Qin Yining cooperated and raised his head to scream. He sobbed, Save me, save me. I don't want to die here. Chao Yuqing looked at Duchess Ding coldly. She slowly raised her left hand and stepped back step by step. The silver-masked spy behind her also stepped back and made a path in front of the courtyard door. Qin Yining secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She grabbed Duchess Ding's hand harder and motioned for her to leave quickly. Duchess Ding immediately escorted Qin Yining and ran out with the remaining 6 members of the Qin-Tian alliance. Seeing this, Chao Yuqing hurriedly took people to chase after them. But when she saw Duchess Ding pulling Qin Yining and running away, the knife was still on the girl's slender neck, and the blood could be vaguely seen. Chao Yuqing didn't dare to chase after them. She was afraid that Duchess Ding would really kill Qin Yining. Running along a path lined with wooden fences on both sides, they turned a corner and saw 5 horses hiding behind a haystack. Duchess Ding had ordered people to hide them here a long time ago. Get on the horses, quick! Duchess Ding urged in a loud voice. The men immediately obeyed the order, 1 man on 1 horse, or 2 men in a team. At this time, Chao Yuqing had already caught up with them. Duchess Ding reprimanded, Don't come over. She tightened the knife in her hand. Chao Yuqing could see the madness and determination in Duchess Ding's eyes. She hesitated and didn't order people to come forward. In the time of a breath, Duchess Ding pushed Qin Yining to the ground. She turned around and took a man's hand and jumped on the back of a horse. The 5 horses immediately galloped on the official road. Go after them. Chao Yuqing waved her hand, and the people behind her immediately chased after them. Qin Yining was lying on the ground. Her palms and elbows were bruised. She was crying and trembling all over. Chao Yuqing arrived in front of her in a few steps. Seeing that the pine hairpin in her hair was late, and she was in a sorry state, crying like a pear blossom in the rain, she sheathed her sword and helped her up with both hands. She asked softly, How are you? Qin Yining looked at Chao Yuqing with tears in her eyes. Her red eyes and nose made her look even more pitiful against her white and tender skin, which was as white as fresh snow. Chao Yuqing lifted her chin to check the wound. Her snow-white collar was stained red with blood, and there were 2 cuts on her jade neck. Obviously, she had scratched her skin when she was nervous. At this time, it was no longer bleeding. Fortunately, it's not a big deal. Chao Yuqing sighed and patted Qin Yining's shoulder. Ignoring the fact that she was Qin Huaiyuan's most beloved daughter, Qin Yining's face was very similar to Qin Huaiyuan's when he was young. Chao Yuqing couldn't bring herself to harden her heart. She only felt that this girl was brought out by her own scheme, and she was innocent enough to go through all of this. Concubine Chao Yu? Qin Yining sniffled, then said, You're so good at martial arts. Are you really the Emperor's secret agent that my maternal grandmother said you were? Chao Yuqing nodded. Qin Yining asked again, Last time, when the assassins tried to assassinate the Emperor and my father, I saw a silver-masked man come to the Emperor's rescue. There was an extremely skilled woman among them. Was that you? Yes. Chao Yuqing calmly nodded again. Qin Yining's feelings towards Chao Yuqing became incomparably complicated. In the end, she said, Then my father knew about your identity from the beginning? Chao Yuqing raised her eyebrows and said with a smile like a flower, Why do you say that? Because you didn't hide your identity in front of me today. Qin Yining lowered her head and used her sleeve to wipe her tears. I really didn't expect maternal grandmother to be like this. It was as if her tears couldn't be wiped clean, so they fell down again. Seeing her cry so pitifully, Chao Yuqing no longer had any doubts in her heart. Instead, she hugged Qin Yining's shoulder and comforted her. Not long after, the dozen or so silver-masked men dressed in black rushed back. Chao Yuqing didn't wait for them to speak and said, "Did you let them escape?" "Yes," the leader of the men said. "Understood. I'll explain this matter to the emperor." "You're dismissed." "Yes." The men cupped their hands in salute and quickly retreated. Only then did Chao Yuqing hug Qin Yining's shoulder and walk back to the courtyard from before. Someone had already prepared a carriage for them, and there was also an unfamiliar coachman waiting outside. Bing Tang and senior servant Liu were beside the carriage and anxiously craned their necks to look around. When they saw Chao Yuqing and Qin Yining walking back, so intimately with their arms around each other's shoulders, and Qin Yining's eyes were red and swollen from crying, their hearts skipped a beat. They had been knocked unconscious and didn't know what had happened. However, the masters of the carriage were two beauties. If they fell into the hands of bandits, even if someone came to save them, they would inevitably suffer. Bing Tang's face was pale with fright, but he still forced himself to remain calm. He went forward to support Qin Yining and said, "Miss, you're injured." Qin Yining shook her head. "I'm fine." Bing Tang's expression became even uglier when he saw that Qin Yining's arms and elbows were injured and that there were bloodstains on his neck. However, since Chao Yuqing was present, he didn't ask any further questions. After they got into the carriage, Chao Yuqing ordered the coachman to set off for the marquee of Anping's estate. She then leaned against the pillow and closed her eyes to rest. Her lazy and delicate appearance was the same as when they first arrived. Even Qin Yining's treasured sword was nowhere to be found. Qin Yining knew that people who practiced martial arts had sharp senses. If he looked at an expert like Chao Yuqing for too long, it would definitely cause unnecessary trouble. Therefore, he only lowered his head and didn't say anything. It was as if he had been greatly wronged and frightened, but he still forced himself to be strong. Bing Tang's heart sank as he bandaged Qin Yining's arms and elbows. He had a few bad guesses in his heart, but he couldn't get to the bottom of it. He was afraid that he would rub salt into Qin Yining's wounds, so he could only whisper some dry words to comfort her. In the evening, the carriage stopped in front of the marquee of Anping's estate. Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing got off the carriage. Chao Yuqing smiled and said, "Fourth young miss, this concubine is tired from the journey. This concubine will go back to rest first. Fourth young miss should also rest early." Her behavior was no different than usual. Qin Yining knew that Chao Yuqing hoped that today's matter could be kept a secret. She deliberately cried until her eyes were swollen. At this time, she forced a strong smile and said, "Concubine mother, take care. I still need to go to father's study to borrow a book to read. Since we're not going the same way, I won't be going with concubine mother." Chao Yuqing raised her eyebrows. She didn't expect Qin Yining to directly tell her that he was going to see Qin Huaiyuan. "Yes, then fourth young miss, please go ahead." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. After exchanging greetings with Chao Yuqing, they parted ways. After entering the estate, Qin Yining directly went to the study in the outer courtyard. He asked a servant and confirmed that Qin Huaiyuan was inside. He said, "I'll have to trouble you to pass on the message for me. Just say that I want to borrow a book from father to read. I don't know if it's convenient for father right now." When the servant heard this, he smiled and agreed. He happily went to pass on the message. At this time, Qin Huaiyuan was sitting cross-legged on the Arhut bed next to the window and reading a book. When he heard the servant's reply, he felt that it was a bit strange. The Shuren house had a rich collection of books. If Qin Yining wanted to read any book, the Shuren house would be more than enough. Today, Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing went to the Fairy Lady Temple to perform rituals. They probably just came back. Something must have happened on the way back. "Invite fourth young miss in." The servant immediately went to respectfully invite Qin Yining in. However, when he reached the brighter part of the corridor, he was able to clearly see Qin Yining's sorry state. The servant's heart trembled. He was afraid that he would get into trouble for prying into his master's secret. He hurriedly bowed his head and retreated. Qin Yining left Bing Tang outside and entered the room by himself. As soon as Qin Yining walked past the screen of the four gentlemen of Plum Blossom, Orchid, Bamboo, and Chrysanthemum Pavilion, she met Qin Huayuan's eyes. When Qin Huayuan saw that Qin Yining's eyes were red and swollen from crying, he was stunned. "Sister Yi, did you suffer?" His first reaction was that concubine Chao had bullied his daughter. Qin Yining took off her cloak and hung it to the side, revealing her dirty clothes and bandaged hands. She said, "I encountered some things when I went out today. Is it convenient for father to talk here?" Qin Huayuan nodded. His long eyebrows were tightly knitted as he sized up Qin Yining. He saw that her hands and elbows were simply bandaged. Other than her swollen eyes, there were bloodstains on her snow-white collar. Qin Huayuan put down his book and strode over without even putting on his shoes. He lifted Qin Yining's chin and carefully examined her neck. "You're injured? Who hurt you?" "Madame Chao." It seems that father already knew Madame Chao's true identity. Qin Yining's words made Qin Huayuan look at her in surprise. After a while, he said, "You knew?" "Yes." Qin Huayuan frowned and said, "Are your injuries serious? Do you need a doctor first? Are you hurt anywhere else?" "I'm fine. Miss Tang already treated my injuries on the way back." Chapter 141. After Qin Huayuan finished speaking, he raised his voice and called for someone. "Go invite Miss Tang over." Chi Tai, who was waiting outside, immediately complied. Not long after, Bing Tang entered the room and bowed. "Greetings to the Marquis. Miss Tang, there's no need to be so courteous. I'll have to trouble you to go to the inner residence and fetch a set of clothes for Sister Yi. Also, secretly bring some medicine to treat Sister Yi's wounds." Upon hearing this, Bing Tang immediately understood that Qin Huayuan was hinting that today's matter couldn't be revealed. She nodded seriously and said, "Yes, this servant will go right away. Thank you for your trouble, Miss Tang." Seeing that she understood quickly, Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded his head in greeting. "This servant doesn't dare. Serving Miss is this servant's duty." Bing Tang bowed and retreated. Qin Huayuan ordered Chi Tai to stand guard outside and not allow anyone to enter the study. After everything was arranged properly, he looked inquiringly at Qin Yining. Qin Yining carefully recounted today's events to Qin Huayuan without concealing anything. After hearing this, Qin Huayuan was silent for a long time. He lowered his eyes and looked at the blue and white porcelain bowl on the table with carps playing with lotuses. He didn't look like he was in a daze or thinking. He just sat there quietly. However, Qin Yining knew that Qin Huayuan's mind must be in turmoil. Many things would be connected, and many things would be difficult to decide. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Qin Huayuan said, "That day, when we returned to the capital, you returned home while father was stationed outside the city. The next day, His Majesty arranged a welcoming ceremony. However, an assassin suddenly attacked." Qin Yining straightened his back and looked seriously at Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "Not long after father followed His Majesty into the palace that day, His Majesty's Silver-Masked secret agent delivered an investigation report to His Majesty. His Majesty threw that secret report to me. It said that there were two groups of assassins. One of them had committed suicide and had yet to be found out. The other group had been captured alive and had confessed under torture. They were all members of the Green Sky Alliance. And the Silver-Masked spy has already found out that the leader of the Qin-Tian Alliance is your grandmother." Qin Yining was stunned when he heard this. Many disconnected clues were connected one by one. There was a reason why so many things had happened in the past few days. So, His Majesty suddenly wanted to show my mother to the public in order to lure my grandmother to save her? Qin Huayuan nodded solemnly. That day, His Majesty was furious. Father could only compromise and was detained in a separate room by His Majesty. There was no way he could interfere with what happened after that, nor could he spread the news. Fortunately, little Wang Yi messed up this matter. Otherwise, The consequences would have been too horrible to contemplate. Qin Yining's forehead was sweating, and she murmured, "Actually, that day, I also recruited people to rob the execution ground. It's all thanks to Meng Zhishi. Otherwise, not only the Qingtian alliance, but also our family, I'm afraid we would be labeled as rebels." Qin Huaiyuan didn't seem surprised at all when he heard Qin Yining say that she had also arranged for people to rob the execution ground. He only nodded silently. "Father, today's matter must have been arranged by Madame Chao in advance. I can see that Madame Chao's position in the silver-masked men isn't low. She deliberately took me out and pretended to be arrested. Clearly, she wanted to encircle and annihilate the Green Sky Alliance." "Exactly," Qin Huaiyuan nodded. "Although His Majesty is afraid of foreign enemies, he has been in that position for more than 30 years. How could someone who was able to win the battle for the throne not have enough brains? That day, he made use of your mother's matter to come up with a plan. Since it failed, there must be a series of plans behind it." Qin Yining nodded. He couldn't help but feel a burst of lingering fear. Today, if she had agreed to Duchess Ding's request to kill Chao Yuqing, she was afraid that not only would her life be in danger, but her family would also change. The silk lantern was bright, illuminating Qin Yining's unsightly complexion. Seeing the sweat on her forehead and sideburns, how could Qin Huaiyuan not understand her thoughts? When encountering such a matter of life and death, she was muddle-headed and didn't know the truth. But now, the truth of everything was in front of her eyes. She suddenly realized that she had been so close to death. Not to mention a young girl like her. Even he felt endlessly scared when he thought about it carefully. "It's been hard on you. You have to be involved in these matters." Qin Huaiyuan sighed and stroked Qin Yining's head. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said, "Father, don't say that. It's still the same thing. Since I'm enjoying the benefits of being the in-law's daughter, then I have to bear the corresponding pressure and responsibility. I just feel that I'm really lucky. I didn't choose the wrong path and bring trouble to my family." Qin Huaiyuan felt quite the same, so he nodded. Qin Yining asked again, "Father, you already knew concubine Chao's identity?" "Yes." Qin Huaiyuan hesitated for a moment, but still decided to tell Qin Yining everything. The most powerful force in the Emperor's hands is the silver-masked secret agents. These people specialize in assassination, spying, investigation, and protection. Concubine Chao is secretly the leader of the silver-masked secret agents. After the peace talks, the national crisis could be solved, but the domestic disputes in the imperial court became apparent. The emperor was afraid of the Chao family's entangled power in the imperial court and wanted to put a trump card in my hands, so he had me accept concubine Chao. Qin Yining was stunned when he heard this. He said in surprise, "Could it be that Guizhong Chao didn't know concubine Chao's identity?" Qin Huaiyuan shook his head and said, "This is the brilliance of the silver-masked secret agents. Everyone in the silver-masked secret agents hides in the dark and has an unexpected identity. Furthermore, they are absolutely loyal to the imperial power and are absolutely confidential to the outside world. Guizhong Chao didn't know anything about concubine Chao and only thought of her as an ordinary woman. As far as I know, concubine Chao's last marriage was because she was ordered to assassinate her late husband and steal intelligence." Qin Yining heard this and thought of everything he saw today. Such a beautiful woman with such powerful martial arts had become a tool to be manipulated by others. Even the important matter of marriage was not up to her. Everything was a mission. Her last marriage was a mission, and becoming a widow was the result of a mission. Now that she had become Qin Huaiyuan's concubine, it was also a mission. She's also a pitiful person. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh faintly. Qin Huaiyuan only smiled and didn't say anything. Qin Yining sighed. He stood up and said, "Father, I won't tell Mother about what happened today. If Mother asks about my grandmother and the others, I'll say that they're fine. In the future, I'll find an opportunity to tell Mother. I'll say that my grandmother and the others don't want to live in Fairy Temple and want to find a place to live. As for the injury on my body, if someone asks, I'll say that I accidentally fell down." "You're very thoughtful," Qin Huaiyuan praised. "When it comes to concubine Chao, Remember not to change your attitude at all. Concubine Xiao is in our family to help me do some things. At the same time, we can't rule out the possibility that the Emperor wants to arrange for her to monitor me. In short, Father will take care of these matters. You just need to be yourself. Qin Yining heard this and understood Qin Huayuan's meaning. He smiled and nodded. Qin Yining called for Bing Tang to come in. After changing clothes in the washroom and rebandaging his neck, he covered the wound on his neck. Only then did he nonchalantly return to Xingning Garden to pay his respects to the Sun Clan. The Sun Clan took Qin Yining's hand and carefully asked about the situation of the womenfolk of Duke Ding's family. Qin Yining only smiled and said that everything was fine. He coaxed the Sun Clan into beaming with joy before returning to the Shorin Pavilion to rest. Thus, more than a month passed peacefully. It was already spring in the capital. A new batch of spring clothing had been sent to each room. Chapter 142. Bing Tang took out a blue silk shawl and measured it behind Qin Yining's back as he said, I also heard it from the servant girl at Ci Shao Garden. She only heard it when she went in to serve the hot water this morning. She didn't say much and only said that old madam wanted to bring the whole family out for a walk. Nothing else. I see. You don't need to change the clothes. It's fine like this. Qin Yining looked at the white shawl on her body in the bronze mirror and casually took it off and had Song Lan put it away. She sat down on the embroidered stool in front of the makeup table and saw that Song Lan was about to let her try on another light pink shawl. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, There's no need to try it on. It doesn't matter if it's a little wider or a little narrower. Try it on again. What if it doesn't fit you? What's wrong with it? It's fine as long as it fits me. Qin Yining was very tired of trying on clothes and looking at herself in the mirror. Song Lan laughed and said, Miss, you're really something. Don't let the other girls in the family know that you're like this. You're born with a beautiful appearance, but you don't care about your appearance at all. Other people will think of all sorts of ways to get what they don't have. Sixth young miss doesn't dare to eat her fill every day to maintain her figure. Seventh young miss even washes her face with flower juice every day. You, on the other hand, don't care about it. Bing Tang handed over the shawl, belt, and other accessories and said with a smile, Miss, you're born with a beautiful appearance. Moreover, your personal pursuits are different. Why do you think sixth young miss and seventh young miss are like that? Women dress up for the person they like. Isn't it for their own future? Us girls are different. Yes, I don't have anyone I like, so I don't care about these things. Qin Yining deeply agreed. Bing Tang said with a smile, That's not true. When I said you're different, I didn't mean this. Not to mention that you're born with a beautiful appearance, you don't need to care so much. Even if you're beautiful, there's still a little Wang Yi who's devoted to you, right? Qin Yining's face turned red. She rolled her eyes at Bing Tang and said, You're so mean. Bing Tang laughed loudly. Coincidentally, Airbai bounced over to Qin Yining's side. Seeing Airbai's adorable little face, Qin Yining's heart melted. He picked it up and placed it on his lap, stroking its head lovingly. Bing Tang covered her mouth and laughed. Little Wang Yi is really considerate. He left Airbai with you so that you wouldn't think of him whenever you see him. At the very least, this can be considered as a token of love, right? He pointed at the plum blossom fringe on Airbai's neck. Airbai seemed to have understood Bing Tang's words. It twisted and turned on Qin Yining's lap until it found a comfortable position to sit up. It placed its two little paws on Qin Yining's hand and blinked its big black eyes as it stared fixedly at Qin Yining. Don't talk nonsense. I don't have any pledge of love with him, much less a token of love. Qin Yining retorted. She lowered her head and smiled at Airbai. The little white rabbit had a circle of black fur around its left eye. It looked as if it had been punched by someone. It was really cute and comical. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. She picked up the palm-sized little thing. Miss, you still want to carry Airbai? It's time to pay respects to Madame Dowager. If we're late, the people from Snow Pear Courtyard will have something to say. Song Lan tidied up the wardrobe. She took out a light blue thin cloak and draped it over Qin Yining. She then flipped her soft, long hair out from her collar. Qin Yining could only hand Airbai over to Qiu Lu and said, All right, Let's pay respects to Madame Dowager first. When we get back, we'll think of ways to improve Airby. Why hasn't it grown even after a month? Perhaps it's this embryo that won't grow up. Bing Tang smiled as she helped Qin Yining up. She and Song Lan waited on her left and right as they walked towards C.I. Shao Garden. On a spring day in C.I. Shao Garden, the veranda was already filled with green potted plants that had been moved out from the conservatory. The potted plants were made of white porcelain and blue flowers. The green leaves made the originally cold and hard courtyard seem more gentle and lively. They walked briskly along the limestone path and went up the stairs. A maidservant lifted the curtain and went inside to reply. Qin Yining took off her cloak outside and handed it to Bing Tang. She could already hear the lively laughter inside. Qin Yining smiled and asked Ji Xiang, "Madame Dowager, did you like it today? Was the breakfast delicious?" Ji Xiang smiled and said, "Madame Dowager didn't like it very much. Her Majesty the Empress was bestowed the everlasting spring garden and invited many womenfolk from prominent families to tour the garden. Our family also received an invitation. Madame Dowager is inside discussing who to bring along." Qin Yining nodded and thought to himself that the little lass really didn't hear the full story. He walked around the screen and went inside to pay his respects to Madame Dowager. Even now, Madame Dowager still bore a grudge against Qin Yining for bringing the Sun clan to live outside. However, after seeing Qin Huaiyuan's attitude, it wasn't good for her to continue making a fuss. Moreover, there was also the matter of the snuff bottle. Madame Dowager always felt like a knife was hanging in her heart. She was afraid that one day something would happen. Therefore, even though she was angry with Qin Yining and felt that she was siding with outsiders, she still restrained herself a little. "Sister Yi, you're here. We were just talking about you." Madame Dowager smiled and said, "Her Majesty the Empress invited the womenfolk of noble families to tour the everlasting spring garden in order to celebrate the peace of the Dian. This is a great favor. Our family has 3 imperial edicts, and each of them can bring someone with them. Naturally, you can also go with your mother." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. Granddaughter has never seen this kind of market before. However, where is this everlasting spring garden? Qin Yining smiled and respectfully placed the refreshments that had just been brought in next to Chao Yuqing's hand. He said with a bit of pride, "You don't even know about Everlasting Spring Garden? Everlasting Spring Garden is a manor in the Everlasting Spring Mountain, 40 leagues south of the capital. Because there are hot springs in the mountain, the cold wind can't blow in. Therefore, Everlasting Spring Garden is very warm all year round. It's said that flowers can be seen blooming even in the winter." Speaking up to here, Qin Yining couldn't help but praise. The Emperor really dotes on Her Majesty the Empress. Madame Dowager immediately nodded and smiled at Chao Yuqing. Her Majesty the Empress naturally dotes on her. "Tomorrow, we're going for a spring walk in the garden. Yuqing, come with me." Chao Yuqing hurriedly put down the half-eaten refreshments in her hand and gracefully stood to bow to Madame Dowager. "Many thanks, madam." Good child. There's no need to be so polite with me." Madame Dowager pulled Chao Yuqing to her side and sat next to her. When Qin Yining saw this, he couldn't help but proudly raise his eyebrows at Qin Yining. Qin Yining had been standing next to the Sun clan, who had been sitting quietly on the stool without saying a word. He patted the Sun clan's shoulder in a comforting manner. Madame Dowager said, "I'll give you some time to go back and prepare. Yuqing will naturally come with me. First daughter-in-law, second daughter-in-law, go back and discuss who to bring. The people going to Everlasting Spring Garden this time are the womenfolk of the capital's prestigious families. You need to be careful." What needed to be careful was naturally the marriage of the children. Even if the womenfolk were going on a trip, it was good to first see their future mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Seeing the girls' faces full of anticipation and the undercurrent between second and third aunts, the hearts of everyone present became alive. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh. Spring really had arrived. Chapter 143. Qin Yining helped the members of the Sun clan up. After bowing and bidding farewell to the old madam, they left first. Behind them were Chao Yuqing and Qin Huaining. Qin Huaining smiled and held Chao Yuqing's arm. Adoptive mother, this visit to the garden is a great thing. Can adoptive mother bring daughter along? Daughter can also broaden her horizons. When Qin Yining heard Qin Huaning's voice, she felt sick of it. The members of the Sun clan's complexion was already unsightly, so they quickened their pace. However, the voices behind them still entered their ears without any obstruction. I'm only a concubine. How can I be qualified to bring someone along? It's already an exception for the old madam to bring me along. I'm just an accessory. How can I bring another accessory? Chao Yuqing smiled and said, Miss Huaning, why don't you ask the madam? The members of the Sun clan felt their hearts burn with anger. They inwardly cursed this bitch for being pretentious. Ever since Madame Chao married into the family, Qin Huaning had long stopped coming to Xingning Garden to pay her respects. When they met, she wasn't even willing to call her mother. Now that there was a problem, she actually instigated Qin Huaning to come find her to solve it. She was clearly trying to block her heart. The members of the Sun clan slowed down and wanted to flare up, but they were stopped by Qin Yining. Mother, are we going to walk back or take a carriage? After Qin Yining asked, she smiled and said, Mother's body is a bit better. How about daughter accompany you for a walk? Walking is also good for your body. If Qin Huaning wanted to ask for help, then let her do it in public. In any case, she shouldn't even think about entering Xingning Garden. The members of the Sun clan didn't understand Qin Yining's meaning, but today, they had been dragged by Qin Yining to walk every day. If they didn't walk, their bodies wouldn't be relaxed. Thus, they suppressed their anger and nodded. Let's walk back. Chao Yuqing, who was behind them, glanced at Qin Yining. With a smile, she took down the small sunny pouch at her waist that contained snacks and put a candied date in her mouth. She didn't take the carriage but walked behind the members of the Sun clan and Qin Yining. Qin Huaning's expression was somewhat unsightly. Madame Chao had married into the family for a few days and understood Qin Huaning's habits very well. She always carried snacks with her. When she saw a good show, she would habitually eat something. She felt that it was time for her to put on a good show. She wanted to see how she would beg Madame's son. Qin Huaning's mind of the Sun, of the family, of the Sun family of Chong Garden, and of the Sun wanted to see her make a fool of herself. Of the us of Xe. Even if the men of the noble families weren't invited to this outing, her dignified character would leave a good impression on the noble ladies. This way, there would be more opportunities for marriage talks in the future. Qin Huaning made up his mind. He smiled and took 2 quick steps forward. Madam, you, don't call me that. The members of the Sun clan didn't wait for Qin Huaning to finish speaking and coldly reprimanded. You've long wanted to be someone else's daughter. When people make things difficult for me, you've never said a word for me. I've doted on you like a pearl and treasure for 14 years. You can fall out with me just like that. How can you have the nerve to beg me now? You've misunderstood. Your daughter is... I'm not your mother now. Although you're your father's adopted daughter in name, you can count it yourself. How long has it been since you've paid your respects to me? How long have you stopped calling me mother? Even when I was terminally ill, I didn't see you come to take care of me. When I was about to be beheaded, you hid in the estate. Qin Huaning, you have the nerve to call me mother? The Sun clan's voice wasn't soft. Even the second madam and third madam behind Chao Yuqing, as well as the other young ladies, heard it clearly. Qin Huaning didn't expect the Sun clan to be so merciless. Her footsteps paused as tears welled up in her eyes. She looked at Chao Yuqing for help. Adoptive mother, you. Chao Yuqing pouted and spat out a date pit. She then stuffed a candied date into her cherry mouth and held it. Only then did she say, Young lady, don't be anxious. The Empress's banquet has only invited some of the capital's respectable noble ladies and their womenfolk. It's said that only 8 families have the right to attend. Those who have a legitimate daughter naturally have to bring their legitimate daughter. If they don't have a legitimate daughter, then they can choose an outstanding concubine's daughter. Young lady is the adopted daughter of the eldest branch, so you naturally don't have a chance. But now that the weather is warm, there are many opportunities to go out and play. It's the same if young lady goes out next time. Chao Yuqing spoke slowly, but Qin Huaning felt as if she had been slapped in the face. She was clearly saying that she wasn't a legitimate daughter or a concubine's daughter. She wasn't the daughter of the family at all, so it was normal that no one would bring her. Qin Huaining lowered her eyes and shed tears of grievance. Chao Yuqing put away the bag of snacks. She didn't expect the Sun clan to have improved. They didn't shout at Qin Huaining and even learned to use reason to suppress her. There was no show to watch, so eating snacks was meaningless. Everyone went back to make preparations, and the people who would go out were decided. In addition to the servants, the old madam would bring Chao Yuqing, and the Sun clan would naturally bring Qin Huaining. The second madam didn't have a legitimate daughter. The seventh young lady was raised under her name, so she would bring the seventh young lady. The third madam didn't have a noble title, so she naturally didn't have the opportunity. However, her legitimate daughter, the third young lady, Qin Jianing, was already engaged and would get married in June this year. The concubine's daughter, the eighth young lady, Qin Baoning, was still young, so there was no hurry. Therefore, the third madam was rather peaceful. Qin Huaining and the sixth young lady, who couldn't go, huddled together and cried bitterly for a long time. The next morning, when the sky was bright, there were already caravans ready in front of the marquee of Anping's estate. The first caravan was a sapphire-blue brocade carriage with a tassel roof. The second was a blue-red flat-headed carriage, and the third was a large black carriage for the servants. The old madam took Chao Yuqing's hand and sat in the first carriage. She turned around and glanced at the Sun clan, then called the second madam with a smile. "Bring seventh young lady and sit with me. We can also talk." Her intention to isolate the Sun clan and Qin Yining was very obvious. Qin Yining brought a footstool over to serve the Sun clan and got on the second blue-red flat-headed carriage. He also jumped on and pulled Mother Jean and Bing Tang onto the carriage. He then pulled the Sun clan's hand and advised in a low voice, "Let's sit together. It'll be more comfortable." The Sun clan smiled bitterly. "You can see this. People, all have their eyes on the top of their heads. Flattering the strong and stepping on the weak can be seen everywhere." Qin Yining, who lived in the marketplace, understood this principle since he was young. Therefore, he always forced himself to be strong and to become strong. Now that she saw that Sun Shi was so depressed, she held her hand and comforted her in a gentle voice. The caravan slowly drove towards the south gate. When they arrived outside the city, they saw that the Empress's imperial carriage and the other women of the 7 noble families had already arrived. Basically, each family had 3 or 4 carriages. The Empress's imperial carriage was at the front. The 8 women's entourage, as well as the accompanying servants and guards, seemed to stretch endlessly. It was grand and imposing. The Empress was most particular about grandeur. When she gave the order to depart, ceremonial music played. Immediately, there were guards from the palace running all the way to the back. They stood outside the caravan, 1 guard every 10 feet. Qin Yining lifted the curtain and looked outside. The fields were green, and the potholes on the official road had long been filled in. In addition, there was this grand procession. If the Qin-Tian alliance wanted to kill the Demon Empress, this was a good opportunity. They might even be able to kill all the women of the 8 great families in the capital. However, they didn't encounter any assassins on this trip. Everything went smoothly. Because the Empress was going to leave, the Emperor had already ordered people to check the road to everlasting Spring Mountain. The road was flat. Therefore, at noon, the caravan slowly came to a stop. A small eunuch wearing the gray uniform of a eunuch ran over from the front and told the women to get off the carriage. Qin Yining helped the members of the Sun clan off the carriage. Looking at the green mountains and the picturesque peach trees on both sides of the road, they felt refreshed. "Are we here already?" Qin Yining asked the eunuch beside her. The eunuch smiled and said, replying to young Miss, "The Empress said that the air here is fresh and the scenery is pleasant. She plans to walk up the mountain. First, it is convenient to see the scenery. Second, it is also a bit of a picnic. Therefore, she asked the madams and young misses to accompany her on the walk." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. The Empress is truly in a refined mood. As soon as she finished speaking, someone behind her echoed, "The scenery here is so beautiful." Only the Empress can receive the Emperor's favor. Yes, the Empress is blessed by the heavens. She is always favored. It is truly enviable. Qin Yining didn't recognize the noble women around her, so she didn't interrupt. On the other hand, the members of the Sun clan, because of their childhood environment, were able to socialize with ease at this time. The members of the Sun clan pointed at a woman in her 40s wearing a red embroidered robe and said, "This is Duke Ongwa's Madame Li. Greetings to Madame Li." Qin Yining gracefully saluted. Duke Ongwa's madam smiled and nodded. She pulled over a 17 or 18-year-old girl and said, "This is my youngest daughter, Yin Yin." Li Yin Yin walked forward with a smile and curtsied to Qin Yining. Qin Yining held her hand and returned the greeting. "Greetings to older sister. Greetings to younger sister Qin. I have long heard that younger sister Qin is devastatingly beautiful. Now that I have seen you, even older sister can't help but want to take a few more glances." Li Yin Yin smiled like a flower and held Qin Yining's arm. When the other noble women who were chatting with the old madam saw that the Sun clan had brought Qin Yining to chat with the women of Duke Ongwa's madam, they seemed to have found the right direction and came forward to exchange greetings. The Sun clan brought Qin Yining to meet many people in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Qin Yining's memory was extremely good. He only needed to greet them to remember them in his heart. He discovered that the lowest rank present today was a marquis. The only one without a noble rank was Chao Guozhou's wife, the Empress's sister-in-law. Qin clan, Qin Yining, and the Sun clan naturally remembered them. Last year, Qin Yining received an imperial edict to enter the palace. He actually encountered Chao Guozhou with his wife and son at the Empress's residence. Chao Guozhou's son, who was also the Empress's nephew, actually dared to take liberties with her in front of her. If it wasn't for her quick reflexes and weeping on the spot, causing the Emperor to know that he was in the wrong, she probably would have married into the Chao family. Now that he saw Chao Guozhou's wife again, Qin Yining's heart was very subtle. However, on the surface, he pretended to have forgotten about this person and was well-mannered. The Empress looked at Qin Yining and recalled Pang Zhao's rudeness in front of the Emperor and the Emperor's concession. She couldn't help but snort lightly and lazily said, "Let's go. When we reach the garden, the banquet will begin." Chapter 144. The spring scenery was just right. The new greenery stretched out. The fresh air had a faint fragrance of flowers, the chirping of birds and the chirping of insects near and far. The scenery was pleasant and made people feel relaxed and happy. The womenfolk were raised in the boudoir and naturally didn't go out on normal days. Even if everyone had a garden at home, the artificial scenery was naturally different from this kind of wilderness. Moreover, the more they walked up the slope, the more precious flowers and plants there were. In addition to the glory and pride of accompanying the Empress, even old matriarch, who usually had to sit in a sedan chair to stroll around the garden, felt that her steps were light and she was in a good mood. Hearing that the Empress had arrived, the eunuchs who were guarding the garden had already come down to greet her. They approached and bowed before leading the way for the Empress. "Empress Nyang Yang, this way, please." The Empress's white hand gently stroked her hair, her red lips slightly raised, and she lazily said, "You don't need to serve here. Don't disturb Ben Gong's mood." The Empress's power was famous throughout the country, so the eunuchs didn't dare to have any objections. They could only bow and retreat, nervously following behind the womenfolk and walking with the guards. They walked slowly, admiring the scenery along the way. Old matriarch and the other noble women all clustered around the Empress, panting as they walked, but they didn't forget to praise the scenery of this place to the heavens and earth. They also repeatedly praised the Empress for being the only one in the world, causing the Empress to be full of pride and not stingy with her laughter. Qin Yining supported the panting Sun clan and walked at the back of the group. He didn't curry favor with the Empress, only admiring the scenery. In a low voice, he said to Sun clan, "Mother, how are you feeling? Are you tired?" "Not bad. Your body's foundation is good. I've really been idle these years." Sun clan panted as she waved her hand and smiled. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Mother, walk 2 laps around the garden with me every morning, Your body will definitely get better and better. Sun Clan shook her head and laughed. She raised her eyes and saw a dense peach forest not far away. She couldn't help but praise. Look at the peach blossoms over there. It's really beautiful. Chin Ening and everyone else looked forward. She saw a light pink cloud spread out, and the radish branches were dotted with makeup, creating a large area of appropriate depth. Perhaps it was because there was an underground hot spring on the mountain, but the peach blossoms at home had just formed buds. Here, the peach blossoms had already bloomed in clusters, half covering the blue sky. The group of womenfolk walked along the winding path in the peach forest. A gentle breeze blew past, causing their hair and clothes to flutter. Petals swirled in the air, dyeing everyone's body with a slight fragrance. On the side of the road, he heard the sound of flowing water. Looking down, he saw the falling petals falling into the water, the clear waves chasing after the red. After walking for several dozen steps, he suddenly saw a cluster of new whitewashed walls and black tiles in front of him. Behind the wall, he could vaguely see the eaves and teeth of the building. It was a brand new and exquisite building, giving him the feeling that he was in a celestial mountain. Ayaya, how long has it been since I saw such beautiful peach blossoms? That's right. If it weren't for the Empress's love, we wouldn't have the chance to see such a fairyland. Only an outstanding beauty like the Empress is worthy of owning such an immortal palace. The womenfolk all talked at once. No one spoke loudly, and no one purposely talked to the Empress, but their voices were just right for the Empress to hear clearly. The Empress, walking at the front, smiled sweetly and proudly walked forward. The womenfolk continued to follow behind her in whispers of praise. The little eunuch who was in charge of leading the way at the back had a pale face. After several dozen steps, they came to the door. The womenfolk looked up at the plaque in admiration and saw the two words, Ning Yuan, written on the black plaque. The Empress stilled and glanced at the palace servant beside her. When did Ben Gong's Chong Chun Yuan change its name? How come Ben Gong doesn't know? Everyone was puzzled and started to whisper to each other. The little eunuch quickly walked forward with a sad face and knelt down to kowtow. Empress, this is not Chong Chun Yuan. Just now we took a fork in the road. The womenfolk were very surprised and stopped talking. The Empress' brows furrowed, and she said coldly, What? After walking for so long, this place is not Chong Chun Yuan? How come Ben Gong doesn't remember there being such a place on Chong Chun Mountain? The little eunuch knelt on the ground and trembled. He was going to lead the way just now, but the Empress didn't let him serve at the front. The Empress was also slightly embarrassed. She was the Empress and naturally had to accompany the king every day. She only had a few chances to leave the palace with the Emperor. It wasn't easy to visit relatives or travel. Although the Emperor had given Chong Chun Yuan to her, she had only come to the hot spring once last year. At that time, there was a group of people following, so she didn't need the Empress to remember the way. Now that she was on the mountain, she naturally thought that there was only her Chong Chun Yuan on the mountain. She didn't think that the scenery she enjoyed along the way was from other people's gardens. Dog servant, how are you serving her? The steward mama beside the Empress kicked the eunuch's shoulder, and he rolled on the ground. The eunuch repeatedly kowtowed in fear. Spare me, Empress, spare me. The Empress impatiently pursed her red lips. Thinking about how she still had a group of people behind her, she couldn't lose her identity as the Empress. She could only suppress her anger and lazily said, Forget it, it's not a big deal. We came out to play anyway. Since we took the wrong path, we'll just walk back. Empress is right. The air here is fresh and the sun is bright. It's very pleasant to talk and laugh along the way. The Empress's wife said with a smile. Everyone immediately agreed when they heard this, and the awkward atmosphere instantly eased. The eunuch quickly got up and led the way in front. The Empress' mood improved a bit. Surrounded by a group of noble women, she walked back along the path in the peach forest and walked towards a slightly more spacious bluestone path. Only then did the Empress realize that the path in the peach forest was a newly opened dirt road. The bluestone path here was the old path that led to Chong Chun Yuan. However, the Empress' good mood and the praises of the noble women faded as they walked forward. With the celestial palace like scenery in front of them, the path to Changchun Yuan seemed lackluster. The begonias on the side of the road were still in good bloom, but they weren't as stunning as the celestial palace like Ning Yuan. The noble women had been praising and flattering the entire way. Faced with this dry scenery, they could only go against their conscience and use words like simple and elegant. The Empress' expression became uglier and uglier. By the time they reached Changchun Yuan, the Empress' face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Just now, Ning Yuan's walls were brand new, and the vermilion door was gorgeous. The buildings in the courtyard were all brand new. Changchun Yuan's red walls were half old, and the door was wide open. The eunuch was kneeling on the ground to welcome the Empress. It was imposing, but the half-old courtyard and the lackluster garden that she saw through the open door really made the Empress feel a deep sense of disgust. The Empress frowned and scolded in a low voice. "How did you prepare to receive the Empress? Where the hell did that garden come from?" Although the Empress' voice was low, the people behind her weren't far away and could hear it clearly. The eunuch in charge of the garden had been specially taken care of by Chao Guozhang. Hearing the Empress' question, he quickly came forward and said in a low voice, "Replying to your highness, that garden was built by Guozhang. The owner of the garden has a great background. Guozhang said to ask your highness to ignore that place." The Empress gritted her teeth, but she couldn't vent her anger. In the end, she could only squeeze out a sentence. "You're not afraid of overstepping your boundaries." Saying this, she took the lead and stepped over the threshold. The Empress called over the eunuch who was guarding Changchun Yuan and said in a low voice with a serious face, "Go, tell the people in Ning Garden that this Empress wants to borrow their garden to hold a banquet. Tell the people inside to leave quickly. This Empress will bring people over in a moment." The Chamberlain replied in a low voice. Replying to Nyang Yang, Guozhang said that the owner of the garden has a powerful background. "Please do not provoke him." The Empress's eyes turned sharp. What a joke! Why can't Ben Gong use the garden that Ben Gong's father built? What's more, the land under the heavens belongs to the emperor, and this Empress is the Empress. Do you think this Empress doesn't have the right to borrow a garden and dine to host a banquet? But Guozhang said that we mustn't provoke him. How dare you? If you don't go, this consort will chop off your dog head. Seeing that the Empress was really angry, the Chamberlain didn't dare to say more. He could only run to the neighboring Ning Garden to borrow a garden. The Empress then raised her chin with a faint smile and said to the womenfolk in the courtyard, "How is it? Are the fireworks beautiful?" The womenfolk didn't dare to make a sound and lowered their heads. The Empress snorted and lazily said, "This Empress has already ordered people to borrow that garden. Didn't someone say that it was as beautiful as a celestial palace? Later, we will have a banquet in the celestial palace. Nyang Empress is the mother of the world. It is the garden's good fortune to be able to visit that garden. That's right, Changchun Yuan is fresh and elegant. It is already a great favor for us to be able to accompany Nyang here." The womenfolk once again pandered, and the Empress' mood improved slightly. From the corner of her eye, she saw that the Chamberlain had returned. The Empress stood up and calmly tidied her skirt. "Let's go over there, Nyang." The Chamberlain saw that the Empress was about to leave and was about to cry. The people in that garden said that they won't lend it. Won't lend it? The Empress' voice suddenly rose. The Chamberlain was so frightened that she knelt down with a plop. Yes, this servant was stopped at the entrance when I arrived. The gatekeeper said that their master said that the garden wouldn't be lent to anyone. You didn't say that this Empress wanted to borrow their garden? Replying Nyang, the servant said that, but they just wouldn't lend it. How dare you? The Empress finally couldn't take it anymore. She angrily swept the bowls and plates on the table to the ground. The sound of broken porcelain rang out, and wine and dishes scattered all over the floor. The womenfolk were so frightened that they all stood up. In such a situation, not to mention the Empress, even an ordinary noblewoman wouldn't be able to maintain her dignity after being repeatedly humiliated. The Empress was furious and started walking. "All of you, follow this Empress. This Empress wants to see how much face the people in Ning Garden have." This empress is the mother of the nation, but I can't even ask to borrow a garden. Today, this empress will take you to Ning Garden for a stroll." Even the imperial aunt didn't dare to persuade the furious empress. Chao Yuqing also didn't say a word after following her. The other noble women didn't even have the courage to speak. Therefore, if the empress wanted to go, everyone could only follow. The group of womenfolk majestically exited Changchun Gardens Gate and walked along the bluestone brick road. When they saw the immortal-like peach forest, they turned and went straight to Ning Garden's new vermilion door. It was easy to say, but the womenfolk didn't exercise much on normal days. In addition, other than Qin Yining, all of them tied their feet. They walked for so long on the mountain road. For someone like the old madam, she had to rely on the servants on both sides to barely keep up. In front of the empress, no one dared to complain and could only endure. When everyone arrived in front of Ning Garden's door, the empress coldly raised her chin. "Go, smash the door for this empress." The chamberlain hurriedly complied. Who knew that before his hand could touch the door, the vermilion door was pulled open. A middle-aged man wearing a dark blue robe looked at the group of bejeweled womenfolk outside and asked with a frown, "Madams and misses, what are you doing?" The chamberlain raised his chin and turned sideways to let the doorman see the empress's appearance. "You can see clearly. This is our dying empress. The empress wants to visit your garden. That's your ancestral graves emitting smoke. Why aren't you opening the door?" The doorman glanced at the empress and then looked at the people behind the empress. He cupped his hands and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I've made myself clear just now. Our master said that the garden won't be lent to anyone." The empress originally thought that since she had come in person, there was nothing she couldn't borrow. Who knew that when she rushed over with people, she would be rejected? The empress's face was trampled to the bottom of the valley. Finally, she couldn't bear it and shouted angrily, "Impudent! This empress is the mother of the country. Can't I borrow a garden? Someone come, catch everyone in Ning Garden for this empress. This empress must return to the emperor and have him send troops to flatten this lousy garden." "Who wants to flatten my garden?" Suddenly, a low and lazy voice came from the garden. Qin Yining suddenly raised his head when he heard the voice and saw Pang Xiao, who was wearing a moon-white brocade robe, a white jade buckle around his waist, and a purple gold crown on his head. He had long eyebrows, phoenix eyes, and a dignified appearance. Chapter 146. Most of the womenfolk had never seen Pang Xiao before. They only felt that this young man was truly handsome. His facial features were exquisite and deep. His slender eyebrows covered a pair of phoenix eyes. Anyone who glanced at him would feel their hearts skip a beat. Although this person was handsome, his body was tall and strong. His imposing manner was awe-inspiring. It made people lower their heads after one glance, not daring to offend him. This person dared to be so unyielding in front of the empress. Wasn't he afraid of the empress' revenge in the future? Where did he come from? The empress' face had turned pale. It turned out that the person her father didn't want her to provoke was this evil fetus. Not to mention her, she had seen with her own eyes how the emperor bowed and bent his knees in front of Pang Xiao that day in front of the Meridian Gate. Even if the empress was full of anger, she didn't dare to show it. She could only laugh dryly and say, "Prince Zhongshuan must be joking. Ben Gong was just speaking out of anger. How could Ben Gong do something like robbing? Moreover, Ben Gong is the mother of the nation. Ben Gong naturally needs to win people over with virtue and be a role model for women. Prince Zhongshuan must have misunderstood Ben Gong." Prince Zhongshuan? The womenfolk looked at Pang Xiao in astonishment. They didn't expect this person to be the evil fetus from Dezhou who killed without blinking an eye. After seeing Pang Xiao, all the womenfolk subconsciously looked at Qin Yining. After the peace talks, the rumors about the two of them had never stopped. In addition to Pang Xiao's heroic act and declaration in front of the Meridian Gate that day, how could the womenfolk not be curious? Especially old madam, second foreign, and seventh young lady. They imagined that this person must be a northern man who drank raw meat and drank blood. He must have a face full of whiskers, a body as strong as an ox, a voice as loud as a bell, and a fierce gaze that could chop people up and feed them to dogs. Who knew that this person was such a handsome person? Seventh young lady only stared at Pang Xiao in a daze. Qin Yining frowned and glared at him. What was this person doing? Although the two countries had already negotiated peace, he was still Wang Yi from another country. Wasn't he afraid of stirring up trouble by confronting the Empress in such a high-profile manner? Pang Xiao was in a good mood after being glared at by Qin Yining. She smiled and said, "Since the Empress has no such intention, then forget it." The Empress blushed in embarrassment. How could she, the high and mighty Empress, respond to these words? Could it be that she was going to turn around and walk back with this group of people? Pang Xiao glanced at Qin Yining again and continued with a smile. But since the Empress has already brought people here, this king can't refuse guests at the door, right? Why don't the Empress and everyone come in for a tour? Hearing this, the Empress heaved a sigh of relief, and her complexion looked much better. Since it's Wang Ye's invitation, it's not good for me to refuse. Pang Xiao stepped to the side and casually gestured for them to enter. Then she ignored the Empress and led Huzi and the people accompanying her into the courtyard. The Empress gritted her teeth and entered the courtyard with the help of the palace attendants. The womenfolk naturally followed behind the Empress. After entering the courtyard, everyone finally understood what it meant to have beautiful spring flowers and trees, and what it meant to truly be like a celestial palace and not like the mortal world. Not to mention the exotic flowers and grasses in the courtyard. Even the commonly seen peach blossoms and apricot flowers were planted in picturesque disorder. From afar, it looked like a patch of dark red clouds. The bamboo curtains under the carved corridors and buildings were covered with light green muslin and were hidden among the flowers and trees. Several red-crowned cranes were playing and dancing, adding a bit of celestial aura to the courtyard. The Empress felt her face burning. After entering this courtyard, her face had been trampled under her feet. Compared to Ning Garden, Changchunyuan was nothing to look at. She had been so smug and flattered the entire way. She really didn't understand why her father had built such a unique courtyard. Instead of entering, he had given it to someone like Pang Xiao. In front of the building, there was a corridor that was 1 zhang wide and 2 zhang long. Servants had already set up tables and chairs and served tea and snacks. Pang Xiao sat at the head of the table. The Empress could only grit her teeth and sit below him. The womenfolk of the other 8 families sat in rows according to their family's height. The old matriarch of the family Qin, who had a complicated relationship with Pang Xiao, was pushed to the area opposite the Empress. The old matriarch sat at the front, followed by the Sun clan and Second Foreign, followed by Qin Yining and 7 Xiaojia. Pang Xiao lazily poured himself a drink and didn't have any intention of paying attention to the womenfolk sitting there. However, the Empress was a guest and couldn't overstep her boundaries. The Empress finally realized that agreeing to come in was asking for humiliation. Pang Xiao was clearly using this opportunity to slap her face in front of everyone, but she couldn't do anything about it. How many years had it been? The Empress had never been wronged like this. If the Emperor was here, she would have already thrown herself into his arms and cried. Right now, she could only endure it. Pang Xiao's attitude of neglecting the Empress, other than the Empress's own family, everyone else was secretly pleased. These womenfolk of the noble families were respectful to the Empress on the surface and even flattered her. However, who didn't secretly curse her as the demon Empress that brought chaos to the country. Relying on the Emperor's support, the demon Empress had harmed many loyal officials. If it wasn't for this demon, the Dian dynasty wouldn't have fallen to its current state. When the womenfolk looked at the rumored murderous little Wang Yi again, they felt that he was much more pleasing to the eye. Also, he was a rarely seen handsome man. The private seats are boring. Madams and misses, feel free to sit. Pang Xiao saw that these people were all sitting and waved his hand. The Empress's expression was so ugly. Who would go to the garden at this time? They didn't like the Empress, but they had to fear the Empress's ability to talk pillow talk. Pang Xiao saw that no one dared to move. The Empress's face was dark and full of grievance. He couldn't help but laugh and say, "Since no one wants to play, then forget it." Since the important madams and misses of the Dian dynasty are all here, you can all be witnesses for this king." The empress and the others all looked at Pang Xiao. Qin Yining's eyebrows jumped. He had a bad feeling. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "This king's new garden originally had a name. It was called Spring Painting Garden. Do you know why this king changed it to Ning Garden? Because a girl's maiden name could not be spread, even if they were all womenfolk. Most of the people present only knew the surname of the other person and their rank in the family. When they called each other, they mostly called them Second Miss Zhang, Wang Darren, and so on. Only those who were very familiar with each other knew the maiden name. Therefore, the people present did not immediately understand Pang Xiao's words. But due to the rumors between Qin Yining and Pang Xiao, everyone could guess. This king has been on the battlefield for many years. His hands have been stained with blood. His heart has long been like a boulder. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be captivated by a woman. The woman that this king likes has the character Ning in her maiden name. Although their daughter is ranked in the Ning generation, it is said that when she first came home, there were people who said that she did not deserve to be listed in the genealogy and did not deserve to have this name. Pang Xiao looked at the old madam. The old madam was sweating all over, and her face was red. But in this king's heart, no one else deserves to have the Ning character. This king changed Spring Painting Garden to Ning Garden. First, he took her maiden name. Second, he took the meaning of the Ning character. He gave this garden to her in front of you. This king promised her a lifetime of peace and quiet. You are all witnesses to this king. Chapter 147. Qin Yining sat on the rose chair, and Pang Xiao bent down to look at her. Their faces were very close, and she could almost smell his unique, refreshing scent. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat, and then it began to beat wildly. Her cheeks were dyed red, and a layer of mist appeared in her bright eyes due to embarrassment and anger. This person was really... Qin Yining was almost unable to distinguish his feelings towards Pang Xiao. He was angry at his arrogant and direct actions, but his heart couldn't help but throb. However, if she really accepted this garden in front of everyone, not to mention offending the demon empress, even her father would be suspected by the emperor of colluding with the enemy and betraying the country. She didn't have the right to decide whether she wanted to be bound to Pang Xiao, because behind her was the fate of the entire family Qin. At this moment, Qin Yining suddenly felt that if Pang Xiao wasn't from Dezhou, if their two countries didn't have such a relationship, or if she wasn't the daughter of family Qin, and if Pang Xiao wasn't Pang Zhongjing's son, then everything would be fine. After all, there were too many differences between them. Pang Xiao didn't want to let go of any of her tiny emotions, so he kept watching her carefully. Her red cheeks and watery eyes clearly revealed that she was already moved, but her gradually dimming eyes and pink lips that she couldn't help but purse also expressed her helplessness and compromise. Pang Xiao immediately understood Qin Yining's concerns. As expected, Qin Yining stood up, looked up at Pang Xiao, and said righteously, "I don't accept a reward without any effort. Moreover, I have nothing to do with little Wang Yi, so I can't accept such a valuable gift for no reason. I ask that little Wang Yi take back his order." Such a strong refusal made the womenfolk come back to their senses from the dreamlike declaration. Some of the clear-headed women who understood national affairs understood Qin Yining's meaning. Of course, there were also people who secretly scolded Qin Yining for not knowing what was good for him. Who was little Wang Yi? To be so courteous to a woman. It was a blessing that she had accumulated over 8 lifetimes. Qin Yining actually dared to forcefully reject her, and even said such hurtful words like, "This has nothing to do with you." Wasn't she afraid that little Wang Yi would kill her in a fit of anger? The scene fell silent. Just as the Sun Clan members stood up worriedly, fearing that Pang Xiao would break Qin Yining's neck in a fit of anger, Pang Xiao burst into laughter. "You're still looking down on me. My self-esteem is almost gone because of you." He no longer called himself this king. "Wang Yi, please be careful with your words." Qin Yining frowned. "I'm sure Wang Yi already understood what I said just now. Wang Yi and I don't walk the same path, so I ask Wang Yi to conduct yourself with dignity." It doesn't matter if we don't walk the same path. I'll just walk the same path as you. I like you and want to please you. This is my own business and has nothing to do with you. Qin Yining's almond-shaped eyes widened. She didn't expect this person to be so thick-skinned. He even dared to say such words in public. Sister E, if you don't like it, I definitely won't force you. Think about it. When have I ever forced you before? When Qin Yining thought about that forced kiss, her face flushed red. She really wanted to give this thick-skinned guy a good beating. Pang Xiao didn't seem to notice and continued to smile. This garden is just to tease you. In the future, if you don't want it, I definitely won't force you. However, you'll have to bear with it this time. This morning, I've already signed the deed to the land and the house in your name. I'm sure that when you return home, your head shopkeeper will give it to you. You. Qin Yining was stunned. All right, it's my fault. In order to see her expression clearly, Pang Xiao bent down to her height again. While observing her expression, he softened his tone and coaxed her. Don't be angry, all right? I won't be like this in the future, just this once. Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao, who was speaking to her so nicely, and found it hard to associate him with the rumored murderous man who killed without blinking an eye. It was also because he was such an iron-blooded and domineering person that she was moved by his gentleness in front of her. Pang Xiao had prepared the deed to the land and the house in advance and forced it on her. He had cleared most of the suspicion on her and her father, and he had also taken the blame for her. She was the one who had benefited from it, but outsiders would scold him for forcing her. Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao with a complicated gaze. He couldn't refuse anymore. Pang Xiao laughed. He felt that she looked like a snowy white rabbit, even her rabbit ears drooping. He couldn't help but want to pat her head. However, he knew that his high-profile declaration had already achieved the goal of intimidating some people for her. If he went too far, there would be people criticizing her behind her back. In any case, there were still many opportunities, so there was no rush. Pang Xiao turned back to sit at the head of the table. Qin Yining also sat back thoughtfully. At this time, the Empress' expression was extremely ugly. The Emperor doted on her, but the Emperor had never been so gentle to her. Also, the Emperor was an old man about the same age as her father. Prince Zhongshuan was such a handsome and extraordinarily handsome man. The Emperor had just awarded her the Changchun Garden, and Qin Yining had received the Ning Garden, which was even better than the Changchun Garden. If Qin Yining had seduced the Prince Zhongshuan, then it would be fine. But now, even an idiot could see that in the relationship between Qin Yining and the Prince Zhongshuan was the weaker party. In terms of men and decency, the Empress had lost completely. Even the beauty that she was so proud of and confident in was slightly inferior to Qin Yining, who was like a blooming spring flower. The Empress secretly gritted her teeth. She had a belly full of anger, but she couldn't vent it. Pang Xiao stood up at this time. Everyone, please do as you please. This king still has matters to attend to, so I won't keep you company. After saying this, he ignored the Empress and only smiled at Qin Yining. Then he left with Huzi. The steward guarding the garden came in and bowed to Qin Yining. Master, Wang Yi ordered this humble one to listen to your orders in the future. This humble one kowtows to Master. Great! The garden that the Empress had been so eager to borrow for the banquet was now Qin Yining's. When the womenfolk looked at Qin Yining and the Empress again, their gazes were very subtle. Qin Yining felt that Pang Xiao had given her a hot potato, but things had already gotten to this point. Since she couldn't refuse, she wasn't someone who couldn't take responsibility. Moreover, the Empress' ashen face really pleased her. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Rise." Then she looked at the Empress and bowed respectfully. "I will listen to Nyang's orders." The Empress glared at Qin Yining's young face that was so beautiful that it made her angry. After a while, she squeezed out the words from between her teeth. "Return to the palace." She stood up angrily and turned to leave. Chao Yuqing and Chao Guozhou's wife hurriedly chased after her. The womenfolk of the other families didn't get to eat the banquet. They had walked so many mountain roads in vain. However, they didn't dare to linger. They could only follow the Emperor's footsteps and quickly leave. On the other hand, Qin Yining calmly watched the Empress leave. She magnanimously sat back down and poured herself a cup of wine and took a sip. The old madam, the Sun Clan, Second Foreign, and Seventh Xiaojia didn't leave. This was because in the Empress' eyes, they were all part of Qin Yining's group. Moreover, the old madam didn't know how to treat Qin Yining right now. Chapter 148. As soon as the old madam spoke, it caused the second madam to frown. Seventh young lady even lowered her head with a red face. The Sun Clan couldn't bear it anymore and slammed the table and stood up. Is this something that the old madam should say to your granddaughter? To think that you're a grandmother. What does my grandmother have to do with you? You've raised such a good daughter, but she's already doing such a despicable thing before she's even married. She seduced a man in public and even let so many people in the capital see it. As the old lord of this family, is it wrong for me to ask? You. The Sun Clan was so angry that they wanted to tear the old madam's mouth apart. You have to speak with a conscience. Sister, he didn't want to go to Xihua City for the peace talks. The old madam knows very well how she went. If I had known that the old madam was going to slander my daughter like this, I wouldn't have let Sister obey the imperial edict for the safety of the family Qin. So many men couldn't do it for the sake of the country. Why did my daughter have to sacrifice herself to participate in the peace talks? Now, a pure and innocent girl is being gossiped about by others. Even you, her biological grandmother, aren't willing to let her go. You have to pat your conscience. Is this the right thing to do? Yes, you are right. The old madam is so powerful. She gave birth to such a good son like Qin Ming. How can she be wrong? We are the ones who are wrong. We should have directly resisted the imperial edict. We should have dragged your family Qin to be buried with her. What a Sun Clan! You have such a sharp tongue to slander your mother-in-law. I must open the ancestral hall and divorce you. You wanted to divorce me long ago. You couldn't do it at that time. Try again now. I am now a first-rank noble lady. My chastity memorial arch is still erected outside the family Qin. You want to divorce me? Dream on? You unfilial slut. The old madam and the Sun Clan started to scold each other like this. Second madam and seventh young miss were both shocked by this scene. For a moment, they even forgot to quarrel. Qin Yining, on the other hand, was much calmer. She pulled Sun Clan back a few steps and helped her sit down with a smile. She brought a cup of tea to Sun Clan and said, "Mother, please calm down. Old madam is my good grandmother. This is the first time I've seen someone talk about her granddaughter like this. I still have to thank old madam for her teachings. Mother, don't be angry." Qin Yining had thought things through. With the dispute over the matter of the Sun Clan being beheaded, the two of them, grandfather and grandson, had completely shed all pretense of cordiality. Qin Yining no longer held any hope for the old madam. Therefore, he spoke without any mercy. Old madam snorted, "Just answer whatever I ask you. As a grandmother, I will also plan for the future of the family of young ladies. Don't fail to appreciate my kindness. Many thanks for old madam's good intentions. However, I feel that old madam shouldn't have seen the business opportunity of Prince Zhongshuan and want to sell your granddaughter for a good price to obtain greater benefits for the family Qin, right?" The old madam was so angry that smoke was coming out of her 7 orifices. She pointed at Qin Yining and scolded angrily. "You wild girl with no parents to teach you. Don't get carried away. Little Wang, you said a few good words, and you can't find north anymore? Don't forget your surname and your name. Don't you know what kind of thing you are? Once you leave the family Qin, will little Wang you give you a second look? Who is such a big tone and can actually make decisions for this king?" Outside the pavilion, Huzi lifted the bamboo curtain. Pang Xiao had changed into a dark blue outfit. His hair was tied up high and hung down behind his back. Compared to his elegant and noble appearance just now, he was more like an unsheathed sharp blade. When old madam saw Pang Xiao come, she stood up in astonishment and couldn't say a word. Pang Xiao carefully sized up old madam and said with a smile, "It seems that the rumors are true. You really don't treat sistery well." Just an ordinary statement made old madam's face turn pale. She was afraid of Pang Xiao, not only because of Pang Xiao's evil reputation that could make children stop crying, but also because of the past when Qin Huaiyuan used a scheme to get rid of Feng Zhongxing. This was also the reason why old Madame didn't believe that Qin Yining would be favored by Pang Xiao. The hatred of killing one's father was absolutely irreconcilable. She didn't believe that Pang Xiao wouldn't care about what happened in the past. If he took revenge, how could their family Qin endure it? In the current situation, even the emperor had to lower his head in front of Pang Xiao, let alone their family Qin. Old Madame had lived like a princess these years. Qin Huaiyuan was extremely filial and rarely bothered her with things. Therefore, old Madame, who hadn't experienced any major events for many years, was like a prey targeted by a fierce tiger when facing Pang Xiao, whose eyes were sharp as if he could eat people at any time. She completely lost the courage to resist. She was so scared that her whole body was trembling, her head was dizzy, and she couldn't speak. Pang Xiao coldly snorted. In the end, old Madame was Qin Yining's grandmother, so he didn't continue to scare her. If she really scared Qin Yining to death, it would be hard to explain when he went back. Pang Xiao waved his hand. Huzi immediately understood and brought in a young and beautiful maidservant from outside. The maidservant was 16 or 17 years old. She looked like a spring onion with a thin figure and a beautiful appearance. Her eyes were especially bright. "This servant greets Mississippi." The maidservant knelt down and saluted. Pang Xiao said, "This is Ji Yun. Let her serve you in the future." "Thank you, Wang Yi, for your kindness. I already have enough servants by my side. I don't need another one. I'll pay for the monthly salary. She has some skills. She can protect you and help you do things. Be obedient. You're not allowed to refuse." Qin Yining frowned and pursed her lips. He was still so overbearing. Pang Xiao saw that she seemed unhappy and realized that his words just now were too tough. He quickly remedied, "I'm doing this for your own good. If anyone dares to bully you in the future, you don't have to endure it. When you can use your hands, don't use your mouth to avoid wasting your energy. If you're angry, just ask Ji Yun to kill her. Don't be polite." "You!" Qin Yining was so astonished that she didn't know what to say. Pang Xiao seemed to be able to see Qin Yining's concerns. His index finger lightly touched her delicate chin. He leaned closer to her and said, "Remember, even if you poke a hole in the sky, I can support you." Qin Yining continuously retreated and avoided Pang Xiao's finger. She also avoided the temperature that seemed to have suddenly risen around him. Old Madame, Second Madame, and Seventh Young Miss were already stunned. No one would have thought that Pang Xiao would actually indulge Qin Yining like this. Old Madame's lips moved. She wanted to say something, but Second Madame pulled her hand. Second Madame was born in a scholarly family. Normally, she wasn't like Third Madame who would curry favor with Old Madame. Old Madame also didn't like her very much. However, Second Madame's grip really made Old Madame's heart tremble. That's right. At this time, it was best not to say anything. They couldn't provoke this evil fetus. Otherwise, with his temperamental and murderous temperament, it was hard to say if they would be able to return home. Pang Xiao turned around and ordered, "Go tell the servants to prepare a carriage. This king will personally send Miss Qin and Marchioness of Anping back to the Fu." "Yes." Huzi immediately bowed and went to prepare. Pang Xiao then turned to look at Old Madame and smiled. "As for you, do as you please." After speaking, he didn't wait for Old Madame's response. He turned around and lifted the curtain to leave. Qin Yining supported the members of the Sun Clan. Mother Jean, who was already stunned, and Bing Tang, who was about to suffer internal injuries from holding back his laughter, followed behind them. They left the courtyard and walked on a path filled with peach blossoms. Pang Xiao walked at the front. His figure was tall and straight. When he walked, his imposing manner was awe-inspiring. He was like a fierce tiger coming down the mountain, making people not to underestimate him. This kind of person, who could be considered a threat to outsiders, always catered her carefully and lowered his posture in front of her. In reality, if Pang Xiao really wanted her, she believed that with one word, He could have the Dian Dynasty Emperor wrap her up and send her to him. However, Pang Xiao didn't do this. He would rather discredit himself in front of others to support her. He also indulged her several times. Qin Yining didn't have a heart of stone. How could he not be moved? Although she didn't like Pang Xiao's high-profile actions, she could feel his intentions. Looking at his back, Qin Yining furrowed her brows thoughtfully. Pang Xiao seemed to feel something. He turned around and met Qin Yining's gaze, which hadn't had time to withdraw. When their eyes met, Pang Xiao didn't seem to care at all as he turned around and continued down the mountain. However, his accelerated heartbeat betrayed his nervousness and excitement. With that kind of gaze, Qin Yining should also have feelings for her, right? The members of the Sun clan were supported by their daughters. They wanted to say something several times, but stopped. In the end, they could only sigh. As for the old madam and the others, Huzi had already ordered people to keep them at the back. They weren't allowed to get close to Qin Yining. It was clear that Pang Xiao wasn't joking when he said to let them do as they pleased. The old madam's brows were tightly knitted into knots. She felt that she had lost all the faith she had accumulated in several lifetimes. Even if she didn't like Qin Yining and felt that Qin Yining was too smart and difficult to manipulate, in the end, Qin Yining was still the daughter of their family Qin. This little Wang Ye's leniency towards Qin Yining and his ruthlessness towards others formed a sharp contrast. Such a sharp contrast made the old madam have to be on guard. Not to mention other things, that maidservant named Ji Yin couldn't be allowed to stay. The old madam kept thinking as she walked. It wasn't until she got on the carriage that she realized that she, second madam, seventh young miss, Mammy Qin, and the others had all been left far behind by Pang Xiao and Qin Yining. When she lifted the blue embroidered curtain on the window of the carriage, she actually saw Pang Xiao leading more than a dozen people on horseback and following around the carriage that Qin Yining and the Sun clan were in. Even that maidservant named Ji Yun was riding a horse. Moreover, she looked valiant and formidable. She was indeed a martial artist. The old madam was so angry that her head was buzzing. She said fiercely, "Let's slow down. Let them go first. Let them be complacent. I want to see how they will deal with this in the future." Yes. The coachman obeyed and slowed down. In the front, Qin Yining, who was riding in the same carriage as the Sun clan, tightly pursed his lips. This person was too overbearing. He didn't ask for her permission when doing things. Fortunately, he was in Dezhou all year round. If he stayed for more Dian, wouldn't she be angered to death? Although she thought this in a fit of pique, the smile and gentleness in Qin Yining's eyes couldn't be hidden. This made the Sun clan inwardly apprehensive. From the looks of it, even Qin Huaiyuan didn't clearly oppose it. Pang Xiao even confessed to Qin Yining in such a high-profile manner. In the future, was she really going to have an evil son-in-law? The carriage was escorted by Pang Xiao all the way back to the family Qin residence. This truly alarmed everyone in the residence. Chapter 149. Chao Guozhang was questioned by his daughter, but he didn't get angry. He only said in a deep voice, "I'll have to trouble the Empress to take care of this matter." Although the Empress was angry, she knew her father's power. She didn't dare to throw a tantrum in front of Chao Guozhang. She frowned and said, "Father, tell me, why did you give Prince Zhongshuan a garden?" Chao Guozhang shook his head and said, "This garden was originally given to another person. I only found out today that this garden was given to Prince Zhongshuan." This subject was about to ask this person, "Oh, who has the right to enjoy such a unique garden?" The Empress had originally just asked casually, but when the words came out of her mouth, the Empress's expression changed. She immediately understood. She leaned over and said in a low voice, "It was given to her?" Chao Guozhang nodded and said, "This subject didn't expect that a Taitan princess would take the initiative to curry favor with someone surnamed Yun." The Empress pursed her lips and frowned more and more. She muttered, "This matter is not good. The Taitan people are ruthless and cunning. Anari is also not a good person. That person by her side, called Si Qin, is even more cunning. Our cooperation with them is a big secret. This matter cannot be known to the Emperor. Otherwise, This subject and father will not have a good ending. If Inari reveals this matter to Yun, wouldn't she have something to use against us? This subject is also worried. However, the Empress doesn't need to worry about this matter. This subject will solve it. Although the Titan Princess wants to keep you and me in check, it's not that easy. However, this subject didn't appear when the Huichun Garden was built. Ordinary people won't know that the garden was built by our family. I'm also afraid that the Emperor will ask about it. I still need the Empress to mediate. This subject naturally knows how difficult it is. Father doesn't need to worry. Yes, the Empress says so. This subject is relieved. While Pang Xiao was escorting Qin Yining and the Sun clan back to the front gate of the Fu, everyone in the Fu was alarmed. Qin Huayuan had not returned yet, but Heir Lao Yi and San Lao Yi were at home. When everyone received the news, they were all flustered. What a joke! That was a master who killed without batting an eyelid. Didn't you hear that even the Emperor had to be respectful when he saw him at the Meridian Gate that day? If they did not receive the evil spirit properly and were caught red-handed, their losses would be small, but if this person had a reason to slander the Dayan and start a war, that would be a big problem. However, to everyone's relief, Pang Xiao didn't enter the door at all. She didn't even pay attention to the people who came to greet her. From beginning to end, Pang Xiao's gaze only fell on Qin Yining. She probably didn't care about anyone from the family Qin coming out to greet her. She only warmly instructed Qin Yining, "Take care of yourself. Don't wrong yourself." Then, she spurred her horse and left. Qin Yining was truly helpless. He looked at Bing Tang and Ji Yun following behind him and could only say, "Let's go back first." Ji Yun is new here. Bing Tang should tell her more about the Fu. Yes. Bing Tang smiled warmly at Ji Yun. Everyone returned to their own courtyards. Let's not talk about what they discussed behind their backs for now. When the Sun Clan returned to Xing Ning Garden, they couldn't sit still. Mother Jean saw the Sun Clan spinning around like a top and couldn't help but laugh. What is Foreign worried about? Nanny, you also saw what happened today. What did that Rome fellow mean by doing this? If he really likes our sister E, he could have asked the Emperor for her hand in marriage. He didn't mention this matter, but he was so high profile in front of others. Our sister E is a young lady and doesn't understand these things. But as a mother, how could I not understand? I'm really afraid that sister E will be taken advantage of. When the Sun Clan thought of Pang Xiao's appearance and aura, as well as seeing Qin Yining's crimson cheeks today, they felt extremely flustered. Mother Jean helped the Sun Clan sit down on a high back chair carved with flowers. She held up a white porcelain teacup with both hands and comforted, "Furin, don't think too much. This matter can't be resolved just by thinking too much." In this servant's opinion, fourth young miss is someone who knows what's going on. Husband is also not a muddle-headed person. This matter should be left to husband and fourth young Mississippi. But little Wang Yi has killed people like scything flax after all. Being born in a chaotic world, it would be wrong for our fourth young miss to follow a fool. In this servant's opinion, fourth young miss is a powerful woman who is not inferior to men. If she can really gain little Wang Ye's favor, it might not be a bad thing. But Pang Zhongzheng was sentenced to death because he fell for Marquis Ye's scheme to sow discord. Foreign, there are many treacherous things in the imperial court. Back then, Northern Ji's tyrannical rule disturbed the people, and Northern Ji's incapable ruler ruled arbitrarily. Perhaps he had long been afraid of General Pang. Although General Pang's death was tragic and seemed to be due to Marquis Ye's scheme to sow discord, there was no lack of Northern Ji's incapable ruler's actions. If this servant can think of this matter, then little Wang Yi might be able to think of it as well. Moreover, since little Wang Yi is willing to get close to our fourth young miss, it means that he doesn't care about these things. The Sun Clan nodded and uneasily put down the teacup. Her fingernails tapped on the table irregularly. After a long time, she said, "Do you think he's deliberately getting close to Sister E to hurt her to avenge his father? Foreign is thinking too much." Madame Jean said with a smile, "Madam, you are too concerned. With young Prince Sun's martial arts and ability, if he really wants to take revenge, he can rush into the mansion and kill people. Do you think he can do it? The Sun Clan trembled when she heard this. Just thinking about that scene made her feel cold, but she had to admit that Mother Jin's words were correct. So Nanny's meaning is that he might be sincere? Since ancient times, what has been the difficulty for heroes? Mother Jin smiled and said, Fourth young miss has completely taken after Marquis Yi and Foreign's good points. Even an old woman like this servant likes her when I see her, not to mention little Wang Yi. Not to mention little Wang Yi. Even His Highness the Crown Prince would be moved when he sees our fourth young Mississippi. Your daughter is grown up, and there are many men in the family who want her. Foreign shouldn't worry about this. In the end, Marquis, you won't watch fourth young miss suffer. Mother Jin's words not only praised Qin Yining, but also praised the Sun Clan and Qin Huaiyuan. This made the Sun Clan feel very comfortable and relaxed. However, when they thought of the old madam's filthy and unreasonable appearance, the Sun Clan still felt sullen. Without a backer, the Sun Clan was forcing themselves to change the habits they had developed over the past few decades. In the end, she also felt wronged. In addition, there had been too many things happening recently. The old madam and her sisters-in-law were not friendly, and there was also a concubine with a good background above her head. She was also worried about her daughter's future. After being attacked several times, the Sun Clan had only gone to the old madam's morning and evening meditation. On the way back, she was caught in the rain and fell ill. That night, she developed a fever. Chapter 150. When Qin Yining arrived, she saw Saiju, the head maidservant, carrying a small white porcelain bowl on a mahogany tray from the small stove under the corridor of the west wing. The bowl was filled with dark brown medicinal soup, which smelled bitter. Seeing that it was Qin Yining, Kaiju hurriedly bowed and said, Fourth young lady has come. This servant has just boiled the medicine for the foreign. How is the foreign? Has a doctor been called? Which doctor was it? What did the doctor say? Seeing Qin Yining bombarding her with questions, it could be seen that he was truly anxious. Kaiju couldn't help but feel that the foreign was a blessed person. She softly said, I ordered someone to take his invitation to Imperial Physician Zhang. He said that the foreign was depressed and caught a cold from being drenched in the rain. Although it looks dangerous, as long as the fever subsides, it will be fine. Howie is in the room. Young lady, please come in. As the two spoke, they arrived at the corridor. Perhaps because she heard their voices, Kylon opened the light blue embroidered bamboo curtain for the two of them and softly invited Qin Yining into the room. The temperature inside the room was much warmer than outside. Qin Yining bypassed the screen and passed through the side room where the banquet was held. He turned into the inner room and saw Qin Huaiyuan wearing a royal blue robe. He was sitting on the edge of the bed and reading a book. Mother Jean was squatting on the footstool in front of the bed, guarding the Sun Clan. The Sun Clan had a cold handkerchief covering their foreheads. They wore snow-white undergarments and were lying on the light green brocade bedding. Their faces were abnormally flushed, but they were sleeping peacefully. Seeing the Sun Clan like this, Qin Yining felt distressed. He lowered his voice and bowed to Qin Huaiyuan. Then he went to the edge of the bed and quietly asked Mother Jean about the Sun Clan situation. After hearing Mother Jean say that the Sun Clan was fine and having Bing Tang take a look, Qin Yining finally relaxed. He whispered to Qin Huaiyuan to stay in the outer courtyard study for the night, while he stayed behind to take care of the patient. That night, the Sun Clan felt a little feverish. Qin Yining kept watch all night. It was only when he saw that the Sun Clan's fever had completely subsided that he couldn't help but fall asleep due to exhaustion. When the Sun Clan members opened their eyes, it was already bright outside. The first thing they saw was Qin Yining, who was sleeping on the edge of the bed. Her long hair was scattered messily on her back, and half of her face was buried in her arms. From this angle, her eyelashes were very long, casting a shadow on her eyelids. After sleeping, she looked even more childish, like a cute and fragile porcelain doll. The members of the Sun Clan were stunned at first, but then they were overflowing with emotions. They felt as if they were soaked in a hot spring, and every blood vessel in their body was thoroughly warmed. This child was sincere to her. Time reveals a person's heart. The few things they had experienced together were enough to prove that Qin Yining was filial to her. The Sun Clan's hand trembled slightly as she patted Qin Yining's head. Qin Yining woke up as soon as he was touched. He raised his head and saw that the Sun Clan was already awake. He smiled and sat on the edge of the bed, then touched the Sun Clan's forehead. The fever has subsided. Mother, how do you feel now? Mother Jean prepared some plain porridge and side dishes for you. Let's eat some before you take your medicine. Okay? The Sun Clan nodded and sat up with her arms propped up. Qin Yining hurriedly took a large pillow and placed it behind the Sun Clan's back. I'm fine. It just suddenly rained on the way back from Xiao Garden last night. I was caught off guard and got caught in the rain. Look at you. Your eyes are all bruised. I'm fine here. You should go back and rest. I'll wait for Mother to take her medicine before I go. I already want to tell old Madam just now. Old Madam said that you don't have to worry about your health for the next few days. She wants you to rest well. The Sun Clan felt vexed when she heard old Madam mention, so she only nodded. Qin Yining accompanied the Sun Clan for breakfast, then watched as the Sun Clan took her medicine. He waited on her to rest before returning to the master's study. She went back to catch up on her sleep and slept all the way until the afternoon. Just as she was hesitating whether to get up to eat lunch or continue sleeping, someone arrived outside. Young lady, someone from the second gate has come to pass a message saying that Master Zhong of Zhao Yun Agency has something important to discuss with young lady. He's waiting outside the residence right now and would like to invite young lady to come out. Qin Yining's sleepiness completely disappeared when he heard this. He hurriedly got up and instructed people to help her wash up. Master Zhong was an expert at doing business. He wouldn't look for her if it wasn't important. For Master Zhong to specially invite her out for a chat, it was enough to show how serious the matter was. Ordinary young ladies didn't leave the house at all. Qin Yining had business at hand, so it was normal for him to go out. He only told the Sun Clan that he wanted to go out, but old Madam didn't care at all. Qin Yining brought Bing Tang and Ji Yun out. Qin Yining originally planned to bring Song Lan along, but Song Lan smiled and said, it's inconvenient to bring too many people along. Ji Yun knows martial arts and Bing Tang also knows medical skills. It's just right for young lady to follow. Qin Yining thought about it and felt that this made sense. He instructed Song Lan and Xiu Lu to help him look after the house and take good care of Airbai. Sure enough, he saw Master Zhong's carriage as soon as he left the residence. Qin Yining let Ji Yun and Bing Tang wait outside while he boarded the carriage. Master Zhong, why did you call me out in such a hurry? Master Zhong said in a low voice, Boss, I have some clues about the origins of the group of assassins you asked me to investigate last time. Qin Yining heard this and said in surprise, Really? Although she had asked Master Zhong to help investigate, it had been a while. In addition, she didn't know much about Zhao Yun Agency's ability to gather information. At this time, she was very surprised. Master Zhong smiled and nodded in understanding. Our people have good relations with the coroner in the city. From the information obtained from the coroner, the assassins at Xian Nu Temple should be the same group of assassins that the Emperor encountered when he personally went out of the city to welcome the Marquis of Anping. The coroner said that the poison in their mouths is the same type. Moreover, their mouths all have the smell of huyin. Huyin? That's right. This kind of huyin is different from ordinary dry tobacco. Huyin comes from the north. The smell is strong and the strength is strong. Northerners smoke a lot. We don't smoke much here. In addition, the journey is long and the price is high. Therefore, there are even fewer people who use it. In the entire capital, there is only one shop that sells huyin. The coroner said that the group of assassins all smoke huyin. Therefore, I order people to quietly wait outside the huyin shop. Unexpectedly, we really found some clues. Master Zhong lowered his voice even more. These people who came to buy huyin are all tall men. They don't talk much. Occasionally, when you listen to them talk, you can hear that they're speaking Taitan. One of them seems to be the leader. He doesn't look like a Dayan person. Not to mention his tall stature, his eyes are light gray. However, if you don't look carefully, you won't be able to see it. Qin Yining nodded. What else? Our people are waiting outside the huyin shop. Yesterday, we met these people who went to buy cigarettes. We secretly followed them and found their gathering place. I don't know what to do, so I came to ask for boss's opinion. Do we continue to wait and investigate, or does boss have other plans? Master Zhong saw that Qin Yining was not surprised when he heard the words Titan. He knew that Qin Yining already had his suspicions. In fact, Qin Yining had already suspected the Titan from a long time ago. Dezhou was in the north of Dian, while the Titan was in the north of Dezhou. It was said that the Titan and Dezhou had been at war for years. Now that Dezhou and Dian were in peace talks, if Dezhou had the energy to deal with the Titan, it would definitely not be something that the Titan wanted to see. Therefore, the Titan tried their best to destroy the peace talks between Yin and Zhou. Now that his suspicions were confirmed, Qin Yining frowned. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Where is that place? Let's go and take a look." Master Zhong thought for a moment and nodded. He instructed the coachman, "Go to the Yongkang Alley in North Jushin Market." Chapter 151. North Jushin Square was located in the northern part of the capital, near Chong and Gate in the northern part of the city. If they went any further, they would be out of the city. This area was not densely populated, but there were a few large families living here. The Yongkang Alley that Master Zhong led Qin Yining to was a secluded area near Chong and Gate. There were no large residences in the area, only some ordinary people. Deep in the alley, there was a large black door. Outside the door, there were two idlers squatting on the ground and chatting idly. When the carriage passed by, the sound of the carriage's wheels alerted the two large men. They turned around to look, scaring Qin Yining so much that he quickly closed the gap between the curtains. What vigilant people! That's right. The people I arranged were smart and didn't get discovered. These two men must be the ones guarding the alley. Master Zhong pointed to a few places outside. The people strolling around here are most likely their people. Although this residence looks small, it's a second-year residence. It can easily house 100 or 80 people. Qin Yining nodded. This place is indeed strange. Is this the only exit? Are there any other exits? Master ordered people to investigate. This residence only has 2 entrances. There is also a dog hole on the side street. There is no other exit. Qin Yining nodded slightly. As they spoke, the carriage had already passed through this place. The carriage driver hesitated and slowed down, not knowing if he should turn around. Qin Yining said, "Don't look back. Go straight ahead. Take a few more detours and go to the back of the residence to take a look." Hearing this, the coachman nodded and continued forward. The idlers guarding the alley and the men on both sides of the road noticed the carriage. When they saw that the carriage had gone far away, they let down their guard and thought that they were just passers-by. Qin Yining frowned and fell into deep thought. This place was indeed unusual. Based on the stature of the guards and Master Zhong's investigation, it was clear that the residence was inhabited by Titan people. However, this was the capital after all, right under the emperor's nose. In addition, the capital's defenses were tight. How could no one have discovered that the Titan were entrenched here? What's more, the Northern City Command Department of the Warden Office of the 5 cities was in the Northern City Jushin Square, and the Water Dragon Bureau of the Northern City was also here. These two were official government offices of the Imperial Court. If the Titan spies really lived here, would they choose a place that was close to the Northern City Command Department and the Water Dragon Bureau? Wouldn't that be exposing himself? However, Qin Yining saw that the people in the house were indeed Titan people. The more he thought about it, the more suspicious he felt. At this time, the carriage had already made a long detour and returned to the back door of the house. The back wall of this house was obviously higher than the houses on both sides. Sure enough, there was a back door, but unlike the front door, there wasn't a man guarding it. Perhaps they were following the example of the neighbors, but there wasn't anyone guarding the back door. If they had sent someone to guard the door, it would be obvious that they were hiding something. This house looks like an ordinary house, but the defenses are as tight as an iron bucket. It's impossible to investigate. Master Zhong sighed and said, "I originally wanted to send someone to investigate, but I was afraid of alerting the enemy. It's not good to expose ourselves before we succeed." Qin Yining nodded and said, Indeed, it's impossible to forcefully investigate this place. Think about it. This house is so close to the government office. The warden office of the 5 cities is responsible for patrolling the city every day. How could they not know? If they knew and still allowed it, then there must be a deeper meaning. Master Zhong was a smart person. Before Qin Yining said half a sentence, he understood, and his expression became serious. If that's the case, it's really not easy to investigate directly. Qin Yining nodded. For a moment, Qin Yining wanted to give up on investigating this matter. In any case, the Titan had assassinated the emperor. The emperor would naturally send elites to investigate. But with the clues in hand, if he didn't continue to investigate, it was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be more trouble in the future. The Titan could assassinate Duchess Ding, her and her father. Things wouldn't be so simple. Moreover, these people were still hiding in the capital and hadn't left. It meant that they had other missions. It was hard to guarantee that it wouldn't be the next assassination against her family. Thinking of this, Qin Yining gave up on the idea of retreating. Looking up, he happened to see a group of patrolling people from the warden office of the 5 cities passing by. Qin Yining recognized the leader. It was Su Mao, the commander of the East City of the 5 cities warden office. Although Qin Yining wondered why Su Mao would bring people to patrol the North City, he didn't think too much about it. Instead, he took the opportunity to stop the carriage, lifted the curtain, and gave a few instructions to Bing Tang. Bing Tang immediately understood and jumped down from the shaft of the carriage to go to Su Mao. Master Zhong didn't understand and looked at Qin Yining questioningly. Qin Yining carefully observed Su Mao's reaction. Not long after, Su Mao followed Bing Tang to the front of the carriage. Qin Yining didn't act arrogantly. He lifted the curtain and nodded to Su Mao. Lord Su, long time no see. So it's Miss Qin. Su Mao's attitude towards Qin Yining was much more respectful than before. It was clear that Qin Huayuan's status was high after he was awarded the Marquis title for facilitating the peace talks. Qin Yining smiled and said, Lord Su, I'm sorry to have offended you so abruptly. Don't mention it. If Miss Qin has any orders, please don't hesitate to tell me. Qin Yining said, just now, I was passing by this place with my servant and accidentally dropped a gold bracelet inlaid with jade. The jade on the bracelet is of high quality and is worth a lot of money. I saw a tall man pick it up with my own eyes. My servant called out to him, but he ran like he was flying and entered this house with my bracelet. Qin Yining pointed to the courtyard where the Titan people lived. So, I would like to trouble you to help me find the bracelet. When Su Mao heard that Qin Yining was asking him to help her find the bracelet, he felt a wave of disdain in his heart. As expected of a woman, she only knew about trivial matters. However, when he heard that the bracelet had been picked up by a man and that man had entered this house, his expression became serious. After thinking about it, Su Mao smiled and said, Miss Qin losing a bracelet is not a big deal. If you really like the bracelet, I'll buy one for you as compensation. However, this lowly official cannot search that residence. Not to mention Mrs. one-sided statement. Even if there is other evidence, this lowly official does not have the right to search. When Qin Yining heard this, she said arrogantly, but I clearly saw someone in that house pick up my bracelet. That bracelet is very valuable. Is Lord Su still not willing to help me? Su Mao became impatient. It's not that I don't want to help, but Chao Guozhang personally told me that the people living here are all important people and cannot be easily touched. I advise Miss Qin to behave. When Qin Yining heard Chao Guozhang's name, her heart skipped a beat. The arrogance on her face was replaced by fear. She said embarrassedly, Forget it. It's just a gold bracelet. It's not a big deal. When Su Mao saw that Qin Yining was tactful and did not make a fuss about her gold bracelet, he breathed a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands and continued to patrol. Qin Yining lowered the carriage's curtain and urged the others to leave quickly. They returned directly to Cloud treading in. Master Zhong and Qin Yining sat down in the main room. Qin Yining ordered Ji Yun and Bing Tang to stand guard outside. They could not allow anyone to come close and eavesdrop on their conversation. When only the two of them were left in the room, Master Zhong asked worriedly. Boss, do you still want to continue investigating? Yes. Since these people have tried to assassinate us twice, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be a third or fourth time. How can I leave such a hidden danger behind? Master Zhong nodded and said in agreement. However, it's not easy to get rid of them. It's impossible to investigate them, even if we want to. Qin Yining also felt that it was difficult. If they captured one person for interrogation, it wouldn't be difficult to capture that person. However, they didn't know if that person would commit suicide to prevent them from being interrogated. The consequences of alerting the enemy were not small. It would affect their future plans. What if he told his father about this? After all, his father was an official in the imperial court. There were many things that he couldn't do by himself. Moreover, if Qin Huaiyuan found out about this matter, the most likely thing he would do would be to report it directly to the emperor and have the emperor investigate. This place was also under the care of Chao Guozhang. The relationship was very complicated. It was unknown how the incapable emperor would deal with it. Without any evidence, his father might even be bitten back. He would definitely tell his father, but that would only happen after he had solid evidence that these people were Taytan spies. Otherwise, it would only be suspicion. It wouldn't be convincing. It would also make people suspect that his father was stirring up trouble. Thinking of this, Qin Yining's expression became serious. After thinking for a moment, Qin Yining suddenly asked, Master Zhong, do we have people in the Water Dragon Bureau? The Water Dragon Bureau was linked to the military department of the 5 cities. It was responsible for fighting fires in the city. Master Zhong seemed to understand something. His eyes lit up as he looked at Qin Yining. There is indeed a brother who collects night incense in the Water Dragon Bureau. Qin Yining was surprised when he heard this. Then he laughed. Collecting night incense is good. The Zhaoyun Bureau is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. They have a wide network. How about this? I'll have to trouble Master Zhong to find this brother and prepare 300 taels of silver. After this matter is done, he won't need to collect night incense anymore. He can take the money and retire. Master Zhong nodded. What arrangements does boss have? Qin Yining then asked Manager Zhong to come closer and whispered the plan to him. Master Zhong nodded repeatedly as he listened. Finally, he said with emotion, it's true that the voice of a young phoenix is clearer than that of an old phoenix. Boss is indeed the daughter of the wise Panin. In terms of scheming, this old man admires you. Qin Yining blushed from the praise. He said, Head shopkeeper, please don't say that. Everything I do depends on your help. It is my fortune that you are willing to help. What are you saying? If it weren't for boss, who knows what would happen to my entire family? This old man will naturally listen to boss's orders. Young lady, please don't worry. Just wait for a good show. Then I'll have to trouble Master Zhong to make arrangements. When the time comes, I'm afraid I won't be able to be there. I'll have to trouble Master Zhong to do everything according to my instructions. Master Zhong smiled and replied, Boss, please don't worry. This old man is very familiar with this kind of matter. Qin Yining nodded and returned to the Fu, relieved. In the following 2 days, there was no news from the outside. The Sun Clan's health gradually improved. 2 days later, just as he woke up in the morning, Master Zhong sent a letter asking Qin Yining to check the accounts. Qin Yining hurriedly returned to the Sun Clan. He brought Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Ji Yun to Master Zhong's home. Chapter 152. Boss's orders have been properly deployed. We'll take action tonight. Does boss want to go and see for yourself? Master Zhong's eyes flashed with excitement. Of course I want to see such a wonderful scene. However, it's inconvenient for me to stay outside for a long time with my identity. Why don't I think of a way to get past my father? Qin Yining's white hand, which was wearing a hibiscus jade bracelet, rubbed the white porcelain teacup. Her pink and white fingernails lightly tapped the cup's wall. She suddenly smiled and said, Forget it. My father is very resourceful. It's not wise for me to hide it from him or deceive him for the time being. Master Zhong nodded in agreement and said with a smile, "According to this old man's opinion, it's better for boss to directly tell the Marquis the truth. Otherwise, it'll be bad if there's a misunderstanding." Exactly. Qin Yining then carefully confirmed a series of deployments with Master Zhong in a low voice before returning to the Fu. In the afternoon, Qin Yining brought Ji Yun to the outer courtyard study. Chi Tai was squatting next to a potted plant in the corridor, trimming the branches and leaves of a pot of jasmine tea. When she heard footsteps, she raised her head and saw Qin Yining. She hurriedly bowed and greeted. "Fourth Mississippi, is father here?" "The Marquis is here. This lowly one will go and report to the Marquis." Chi Tai put down the flower scissors and turned to lift the light blue bamboo curtain to enter the room. Not long after, she came out and respectfully invited Qin Yining in. The study was the same as before. Qin Huan was wearing a light gray cotton shirt and sitting cross-legged on the arhut bed next to the window, reading a book. When he saw Qin Yining come in, he smiled and said, "Sister Yi, you're here. Sit down." Qin Yining sat down on the other side of the square table and waved her hand to dismiss the servants. Then she said, "Father, daughter has a good show to invite you to see." Qin Huayuan looked up in surprise and put down the book. The blue cover had the words Zhuan written on it. Daughter's stage has been set up, and the actors have been found. Everything is ready, except for father, who is an audience. Do you want to go and watch with daughter? Looking at the fox-like smile on Qin Yining's face, which was very similar to his when he was young, Qin Huayuan couldn't help but laugh. "Come on, tell me, who are you plotting against this time?" Percent in CI, Shao Garden in the evening. Old Madam sat cross-legged on the arhut bed unhappily. She held a pipe with a brass and green jade mouth, but she didn't take a puff for a long time. The Sun Clan, second Madam, and third Madam stood at the side. Third Miss, sixth Miss, seventh Miss, eighth Miss, and Qin Huaining were all either standing or sitting by her side, trying to make old Madam happy. "I'm also preparing to make the soft shoes that grandmother will wear in her room. I've already drawn the pattern. I'll bring it over for you to see later. If you don't like it, I'll change it." Qin Huaining held old Madam's hand and said with a smile. Although old Madam didn't treat Qin Huaining the same as before, she was much closer to her for Chao Yuqing's sake. Normally, she would have laughed, but now she was still unhappy. She pushed away Qin Huaining's hand and casually handed the pipe to Mammy Qin, who was waiting on the side. "What did he say? Why is he so busy? Why does he have to take Sister Yi out? How many days has it been since he came to pay his respects to me? I think he's almost forgotten that he still has me, his mother. How could that be? Others don't know how busy the Marquis is. But how could old Madam not know?" Mammy Qin persuaded with a smile. Qin Huaining also said, "That's right, grandmother, don't be angry. Besides, Madam was sick a few days ago, so the Marquis should take care of Madam more." Old Madam glared at the Sun Clan and coldly snorted. Although the Sun Clan no longer had any expectations for Qin Huaining, they were also very disappointed to see her disregard their many years of friendship and continue to smear their reputation in front of old Madam. However, she had always had an explosive temper, so how could she give in to others? "Old Madam, don't take it to heart. Not to mention that the Marquis is busy with government affairs. His family affairs are also limited. Besides, Sister Yi is more intelligent than others, and the Marquis likes her to resemble him. This daughter-in-law sees that the Marquis wants to teach Sister Yi like a boy. Perhaps he has some serious business today, so he must take Sister Yi out, so he might not have time to enter the second gate." Although the Sun Clan was laughing, their words poked at old Madam and Qin Huaining's hearts. Their son was focused on government affairs, and when he had free time, he would dote on Qin Yining and throw them to the back of his mind. However, the Sun Clan wasn't wrong. Qin Yining was indeed similar to her father, so she was more worthy of being nurtured. Old Madam snorted coldly. "You can open a dye shop with just a little bit of color. Fortunately, I raised a good daughter back then. I'm not as fortunate as old Madam to have children and grandchildren around me. I only have Sister Yi as my daughter. If she's unfilial, who can I count on? The Sun Clan also sneered and looked at Qin Huaining mockingly. Qin Huaining bit her lip and lowered her eyes to hide her resentment. Sure enough, Qin Yining was her biological daughter. She wasn't considered a daughter of the Sun Clan. Since the Sun Clan was heartless, they couldn't blame her for being unrighteous. Qin Huaining lowered her head and looked wronged, but she already had an idea in her mind. Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyuan naturally didn't know about the argument in the prefectural magistrate. Qin Yining also didn't know that Qin Huaiyuan valued her and caused old Madam and Qin Huaining to be jealous. In the middle of the night, just as the clock drum sounded, a house on Yongkang Street in Baijuxian district caught fire. Fortunately, this place was close to the Water Dragon Bureau and the military department of the 5 cities. Soon, people from the Water Dragon Bureau rushed over with a water wheel and rushed in to put out the fire. Unexpectedly, just as they sprayed water, the fire burned even more fiercely. It was as if a basin of hot oil had been poured on it. The people from the Water Dragon Bureau panicked when they saw this and hurriedly continued to spray water to put out the fire. However, the more they sprayed, the fiercer the fire became. Only then did they realize that something was wrong. They hurriedly checked the water wheel and found that someone had poured oil into the water wheel. Because oil was lighter than water, the layer of oil that had just been pumped out to put out the fire was actually oil. At this time, the remaining water in the water will still had a thin layer of oil floating on top of it. In this way, the accidental fire became deliberate arson. The people from the military department of the 5 cities and the Water Dragon Bureau were anxious. The fire that had been fueled by oil immediately spread throughout the inner courtyard. The fire was getting fiercer and fiercer. Although there was hope to put out the fire, the people in the courtyard couldn't just wait inside to be burned to death, right? Tall men in disheveled clothes continuously ran out of the courtyard. Indirectly, the screams of women could also be heard. Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyuan wore black cloaks and hid their bodies in the shadows of the back alley. Master Zhong ran over and whispered, "Boss, it's done." Qin Yining whispered, "Good. Pay attention to the front and back alleys. Let our people not have a backup plan. Catch whoever comes out. First, dislocate their lower jaws to prevent them from biting their tongues to commit suicide. If they run fast, simply break their legs. While they're busy putting out the fire, the people outside don't know. Catch these people and send them to the place we prepared in advance." "Yes. Boss, don't worry." Master Zhong rubbed his hands and walked quickly. Qin Huaiyun smiled and looked down at his daughter, standing beside him. "Let's go." "Yes, father." The figures of the father and daughter quietly sneaked into the depths of the alley. Chapter 153. The fire at North Jushin Market was only extinguished in the early morning. But strangely, the houses next to the house were all empty. At most, only 1 or 2 people were left to look after the houses, so there were no casualties. What was even stranger was that there were only 4 people left in the house, and all of them were silent. The Water Dragon Bureau and the 5 Cities Warden's office had seen with their own eyes that no less than 30 men had run out of the house, but now they seemed to have disappeared overnight. Su Mao and the others faintly sensed that something was wrong, and hurriedly sent a message to Chao Guozhang. "Chao family." The servants in the outer courtyard were all sent to do other things by the housekeeper. The housekeeper stood in front of the courtyard door and did not allow anyone to take half a step closer. Chao Guozhang's face was gloomy as he sat on a chair with a yellow rosewood official's hat. His thumb that was wearing a jade ring trembled slightly, revealing his anger. Sitting opposite him was a tall and voluptuous girl of 17 or 18 years of age with thick eyebrows and big eyes. The girl did not have an outstanding appearance, but her facial features were rather deep. She was wearing a bright red collar with peony flowers blooming on it, which set off her healthy, honey-colored skin. Her slightly curly long hair was tied into a bun. Although she was dressed like a lady from Great Yan's boudoir, she was emanating a stubborn and domineering aura from head to toe. She did not look like the delicate ladies of Great Yan. She was the Taitan princess Ainari. "Chao Guozhang, Didn't you say that the house was the safest place in the world, and that you had arranged everything around it? Why are there only 4 of my 30 Titan warriors left, and the rest have all disappeared? Inari furrowed her brows in anger. Chao Guozhang, you must give this princess an explanation. Chao Guozhang laughed coldly. Princess, please calm down. This old man has indeed arranged all the security measures for the residence. I even spent a large sum of money to purchase several residences around the residence as cover. This old man has spent a lot of effort on this matter. Even if Princess Inari can't see it clearly, young Master Sichin should be able to see it clearly. Princess is so noisy. Could it be that you have something against this old man? Sitting next to Inari, Sichin, who was dressed like a scholar, pursed his thin lips and did not reply. His handsome face revealed a hint of anger. Chao Guozhang continued, as for what happened this time, it's obvious that your subordinates were too stupid. Even if they were caught, it's because they exposed their whereabouts. At this time, Princess should be thinking about how to deal with the aftermath instead of yelling at this old man here, right? Inari was even more furious. He slammed the table. No matter how many arrangements you made, my warriors are all gone now. Back then, there were so many people from the Yin dynasty. We failed to assassinate you twice and lost so many warriors, but I was not angry. Our Titan warriors are all eagles of the grassland. Even if they die in battle, they will return to the embrace of Tingri. But now, because of your carelessness, so many warriors went missing before they could even draw their swords. And you still blame the warriors this princess brought for being stupid? Isn't it stupid? If they weren't stupid, why would the house catch fire in the middle of the night? How could they have panicked when they were retreating and ended up being wiped out? Princess Inari should be angry. If this old man had such useless subordinates, I'm afraid this old man would also be angry. I've long heard that you people in the Central Plains don't do practical things and only know how to talk. Today, this princess has seen it for myself. Compared to the princess's incompetence, this old man is a bit inferior. The princess's actions are treacherous, and this old man admits defeat. This old man gave the princess the spring painting garden out of goodwill, but I didn't expect the princess to give it to someone else. This old man hasn't even asked the princess what she meant by this, but the princess is already yelling in front of this old man. Seeing that Inari and Chao Guozhang were at loggerheads, and even implicated the Titan and Dezhou, Sichin hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Chao Guozhang, please don't take it to heart. Her Highness is only concerned about the lives of these warriors. There is still a long way to go for cooperation in the future, so there's no need to hurt our relationship because of this. Chao Guozhang is right. The most important thing right now is to think about how to deal with the aftermath. Inari had accumulated a belly full of anger and had nowhere to vent it, but after hearing Sichin's words, it miraculously calmed down. Although its face was still full of anger, it didn't continue to speak rudely. Chao Guozhang's gaze shifted between Inari and Sichin, and his expression softened slightly. These people wouldn't have disappeared for no reason. They must have been captured by someone. If it was someone else, then it would be fine, but if they were captured by the Emperor's people, then things would be difficult. When Sichin heard this, his hawk-like sharp eyes flashed, but it was immediately replaced by a gentle smile. No matter who captured them, they're already considered useless, so there's no need to think about it anymore. In Chao Guozhang's opinion, if your country's emperor captured these people, how would he deal with them? Chao Guozhang raised his eyebrows. Sichin's first half of his words meant that if they could be dealt with appropriately, then the missing people could be abandoned and treated as if they didn't exist. Surprisingly, the way this Tartar talked and acted was somewhat similar to the style of Great Yin. Chao Guozhang maintained his composure and said, "Young Master Sichin, there's no need to test this old man. If the Emperor were to find out about this matter, then it would be difficult for both of us. However, if we want to deal with this properly, then with young Master Sichin's words, this old man knows what to do." Guozhang, you're a smart person. It's always refreshing to talk to smart people. Sichin smiled. When Inari saw Si Qin and Chao Guizhong talking cheerfully and wittily, her eyes couldn't help but become infatuated as she looked at his handsome face. Si Qin's sharp eyes looked over, but when they met with Inari's eyes, he suddenly withdrew all his sharpness and smiled at her. Inari felt as if she had fallen into a pool of warm water, and her entire body became dizzy. Chao Guizhong took in the two's expressions, but didn't pay them much attention. He called for his confidant and said in a low voice, "Go and call over the people we've arranged in the 5 cities military office and the Water Dragon Bureau. Regardless of whether we use coercion, bribery, or even torture, we must make these people spit out valuable information. These days, if anyone has passed by that residence, and if anyone has been acting strangely, don't let a single one of them go." This subordinate obeys. The subordinate accepted the order and left. Inari and Si Qin saw that Chao Guizhong had taken concrete action on this matter and were temporarily relieved. Present at this moment, Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan were sitting across from each other in the study of the outer courtyard of the Qin residence. Qin Huayuan was leaning against the Arhut bed by the window, while Qin Yining was sitting next to the footstool. Father and daughter were eating desserts and drinking tea as they analyzed the day's events. "I'll hand those people over to Father. Father, you can take care of the rest. I won't be involved." Qin Yining raised her teacup and drank a mouthful of hot tea, diluting the sweetness of the desserts. Qin Huayuan raised his eyebrows and said, "Father suspects that you're deliberately dragging me over to deal with the aftermath." Qin Yining laughed and said, "It is indeed to deal with the aftermath. Even if I capture them myself, I can't deal with them. I still have to hand them over to Father. These people will definitely be useful to Father." Qin Huayuan hadn't slept the entire night and was currently somewhat tired. Looking at Qin Yining's radiant and beautiful face, his smile deepened, and he wanted to test her. Chapter 154. Daughter handed him over to Father precisely because I didn't want to be involved in this troublesome matter. Father, you're asking daughter instead. Qin Yining pretended not to comply, then smiled mischievously. Does Father intend to test daughter? If daughter answers well, will there be a reward? Qin Huayuan was amused by her rare mischievousness. He thought to himself, she's just a girl who hasn't reached marriageable age yet. She's usually calm and mature to the point of acting like an old man, but she's forced by the circumstances. The fondness and pity he felt for Qin Yining increased a bit. You're so clever. You didn't learn to be steady while staying by your mother's side. Instead, you've learned to be more delicate and mischievous. Forget it. If you answer well, Father still has a top-notch inkstone as a reward. How about it? Many thanks, Father. Qin Yining smiled when she heard this. She patted the crumbs off her hands, wiped them clean, and took a sip of tea. Only then did she say, Daughter thinks that there are 3 ways to deal with this matter. The best, the middle, and the worst. Qin Huayuan's eyes flashed, and a smile appeared on his face. Oh, tell me about it. Qin Yining smiled and said yes. These assassins had poison sacs in their mouths. Although each of them was unyielding and committed suicide, it's different from being caught in private without any preparation. Moreover, we've caught so many people at once. Under severe torture, it's possible that these 30 or so people are all unyielding. They'll definitely spit out the truth. Whatever they say, they'll definitely have to tell His Majesty. It's just that the method and timing of telling His Majesty is different. Qin Yining raised her eyes and saw Qin Huayuan nodding slightly. She felt a bit more confident. The worst way is that Father directly takes these people's confessions and testifies Chao Guizhong in front of the imperial court. The advantage of doing this is that the whole world will know of Chao Guizhong's wild ambitions. His Majesty is committed to the peace talks, but Chao Guizhong actually colluded with the Titan to destroy the peace talks. For His Majesty, his intentions are worthy of death. But if we do this, it's impossible to predict how things will develop in the future, Qin Huayuan said. Exactly. Qin Yining nodded. Because we don't know what His Majesty thinks about Guizhong Chao, this method is too risky. If His Majesty favors Guizhong Chao, Father will suffer a backlash. That's why Daughter said that this method is a bad one. Yes, what you said makes sense. Qin Huayuan relaxed and leaned against the big pillow behind him. He said with a smile, "What about the middle plan?" The middle plan was that Father privately went back to His Majesty and asked His Majesty's intentions towards Guozhang Chao. If His Majesty wanted to seize the opportunity to take down Guozhang Chao, then you would be His Majesty's sharp blade. If His Majesty wanted to keep it a secret, then you would just pretend that you didn't know about it. This is better than catching His Majesty off guard in public. When Qin Yining said this, she frowned and thought for a moment. Then she said, "However, this method also has its drawbacks. Although we know His Majesty's intentions in advance, it's hard to guarantee that His Majesty won't go back on his word or be influenced by outside forces to suddenly change his mind. Therefore, Father will easily become a target and will have to bear the consequences of this. Moreover, Guozhang Chao's henchmen are all over the court and have deep roots. Although Father is already the Grand Preceptor, he still can't compete with him. The consequences of becoming Guozhang Chao's target can be imagined. Also, Empress Chao has lived in the palace for a long time. It's hard to guarantee that there won't be spies by His Majesty's side. If their people know about the conversation between Father and His Majesty in advance, this plan will also be ruined." The more Qin Yining said, the more she felt that this method was dangerous. Her expression also became serious. If I can't escape unscathed because of His Majesty's loyalty, then it's a loss. Therefore, this middle plan is also not appropriate. Qin Huayuan saw that Qin Yining's analysis was thorough. She was clearly a young girl, but her comprehensive thinking was not inferior to those who had been immersed in the court for a long time. At this time, Qin Huayuan liked his daughter even more. He also lamented that she wasn't a son. If she was a boy, then he, Qin Huayuan, wouldn't have to worry about not having a successor. Qin Huayuan sighed and said, "Your analysis is very thorough. Father believes that the best plan most people can think of is to privately discuss this matter with His Majesty. However, there is a risk. After all, no one can predict a sudden change." Being praised by her father like this, Qin Yining blushed with embarrassment and joy. Her charming face flushed red and her eyes sparkled. "Father praises me too much. I still have a better plan, but I think that with Father's intelligence, you've already thought of it. Why don't we write it down together and see if we can think of the same thing?" Qin Huayuan laughed. "You little girl. All right, go and get a brush and paper." Qin Yining nodded and went to the large black painting table to grind the ink. She took a purple brush and dipped it in the thick ink. Then she took a piece of paper and handed it to Qin Huayuan. She took another piece of paper, turned her back to Qin Huayuan, and began to write on the painting table. For a moment, the only sounds in the room were the rustling of the brush on the paper and the swaying of the string of pearls on Qin Yining's head. The faint fragrance of the ink mixed with the fragrance of tea and pastries. The atmosphere was particularly peaceful and tranquil. After Qin Yining finished writing, Qin Huayuan also put down his brush. The two of them put the two pieces of paper together. Qin Huayuan's writing was free and easy, while Qin Yining's writing was graceful and neat. The content was the same three words, concubine Chao. A sense of tacit understanding arose spontaneously in the hearts of the father and daughter. For a moment, Qin Huayuan felt that even if this person wasn't a boy, they were still his own flesh and blood and his own daughter. It didn't matter if they were a boy or a girl. With her intelligence, she could still be his successor. Qin Yining smiled as she took the paper from Qin Huayuan's hand and threw the two pieces of paper into the charcoal brazier on the ground. The sparks flickered, and the paper quickly curled up and turned into ashes. "Give it to her and let her report to the emperor. Not only can we sell her a favor, but we can also clean up our family. Whether or not we deal with Chao will depend on the emperor and Madame Chao. In any case, we didn't catch them, so we don't know anything." Qin Yining smiled slyly and said, "The emperor has been tracking down the assassin for a long time. The Silver Mask secret agents naturally have this mission as well. They're called secret agents. If they don't even have the ability to catch someone, where will they put their face? Madame Chao isn't a muddle-headed person. She will definitely take credit for this and bear all the risks for us. Clever. Qin Huayuan's index finger scratched the tip of Qin Yining's nose. Aren't you afraid that concubine Chao won't agree? She is the Emperor's secret agent. She was ordered to catch the assassin. Now that there is a clue, how could she refuse? Besides, even if she has the heart to refuse, as long as father personally tells her, she will definitely agree. When Qin Huayuan heard this, his expression became a bit awkward. He coughed and said, "Little girl, you're full of nonsense. Seeing that you've helped father a lot, I'll take that Feng Shi Yin as your reward." Qin Yining smiled happily. "Thank you, father." "Father, quickly show it to me." Qin Huayuan was amused by her and laughed loudly. "What's the hurry? Do you think father will renege on a debt?" Qin Huai went down to the ground and called for Qi Tai to come in, "Go find the Shi Inkstone that I just got a few days ago and deliver it to the 4th Mississippi." "Oh, that's right. Also deliver that small box and brush to the 4th Mississippi." Qi Tai nodded repeatedly and went to get the things with a smile. Qin Yining giggled. "Thank you, father. I didn't sleep last night, and father must be tired. Why don't we go back together? You can go back to Xingning Garden to catch up on sleep. I'll also go back to the master study to wait for my Feng Shi Yin and brush." Qin Huayuan was in a good mood. He casually put on a robe with large sleeves and said, "Let's go. Father will take you to pay respects to the old madam first. Then we'll go separately to catch up on sleep." Qin Yining couldn't help but be moved by Qin Huayuan's attentiveness. Qin Yining naturally knew that Qin Huayuan hadn't gone to see the old madam for many days. Ever since the snuff bottle incident, Qin Huayuan had been cold to the old madam. Qin Huayuan naturally knew that the snuff bottle incident wasn't true and that Qin Yining had deliberately scared the old madam. However, Qin Huayuan still used his coldness to show his attitude in front of the old madam. He was telling the old madam that Qin Yining and the Sun Clan were people that Qin Huayuan cared about. This really couldn't help but make Qin Yining feel moved. When he first returned home, Qin Yining felt that his father was easygoing on the surface, but cold on the inside. However, after getting along with him for a long time, Qin Yining naturally knew that his father was good to him. Thinking about it, this kind of person who was resourceful wasn't easy to make friends with. However, after making friends with him, he wouldn't easily alienate him. Qi Tai found an inkstone and a box of brushes and gave them to Ji Yun. Qin Yining took Ji Yun and followed Qin Huayuan all the way to the inner residence. Who knew that as soon as they entered the Chuehua Gate, they heard what seemed to be a woman's cries and shouts from Ci Shao Garden not far away. Qin Huayuan's expression changed, and he hurriedly walked over. Qin Yining also felt that something was amiss. He called Ji Yun and quickly followed behind Qin Huayuan. The closer they got to Ci Shao Garden, the more obvious the cries and shouts became. Qin Yining was alarmed when he heard it. The people who were shouts were actually from the Sun Clan. The one who was crying and begging for mercy seemed to be Qin Huayuan. What exactly happened? She hadn't been home for one night and didn't have time to pay respects to the Sun Clan. How did something happen? In the courtyard, Mother Jean and Kai Ju supported the Sun Clan on either side. The Sun Clan's face was already covered in tears, but she still pointed at Qin Huayuan and said, "You heartless bastard with a broken conscience. What good can you get by slandering me?" Qin Huayuan fell to the ground and sobbed loudly. However, his refuting voice became even clearer. "Madam, why do you have to be like this? That voodoo doll wasn't found in my room. I originally wanted to give Madam some snacks with good intentions, but Madam, how can I hide this kind of thing? That's the old Madam's birth date and horoscope. Right now, the old Madam has fainted from anger, and we don't know what's going on. However, Madam only knows how to shout at me. If Madam is really filial, why didn't you worry about the old Madam?" "You're actually in a hurry to refute." Qin Huayuan turned around and interrupted Qin Huayuan with a frown. "What voodoo doll are you talking about?" "Marquis." Everyone in the courtyard bowed in unison. "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.